Husband unexpectedly arrived at the party, caught his wife cheating, and immediately sought revenge. I sat on a car hood by plate 128 when they exited. Her face paled, avoiding eye contact. As I got off, he raised his hands defensively as I reassured them, "You're not worth my time." Then I left in my car. The confrontation stemmed from a lengthy history. I met Jim when his family moved in next door. Both 8 years old, we were the only boys in the neighborhood, naturally becoming close like twin brothers. By 4th grade, we played sports together and had each other's backs, remaining inseparable throughout high school. I met Laura when I was in 10th grade, and we started dating. By senior year, we were still together. Jim hooked up with Annabelle Spears, and they went on double dates with Laura and me. On prom night, Laura gave me her pureness in the next room, where Jim and Annabelle were doing the same thing. After high school, Jim enlisted in the Navy while Laura and I pursued college degrees. I studied civil engineering at Eastern Michigan University, while Laura chose information technology at the University of Michigan in Ann Arbor. Despite the proximity of our campuses, maintaining our relationship proved challenging. Laura occasionally canceled our dates to see someone else, unbeknownst to me, until friends at the U of M revealed her actions. One evening, I followed Laura and a guy to a restaurant on Ann Arbor Road. Spotting me, Laura withdrew from him, suggesting familiarity beyond that night. This signaled it wasn't their first encounter, revealing a pattern of behavior I was unaware of. I had no clue what they were discussing, but Laura seemed uneasy, stealing glances at me while I pretended indifference. After finishing my meal, I left without acknowledging her and drove home. The next day, Friday, our planned date came and went without me showing up or even calling to cancel. Instead, I immersed myself in a book, disconnecting from everything. Saturday, I enjoyed a party at the Delta Phi house and met Robin, who left a lasting impression. Sunday, while engrossed in my studies, the doorbell interrupted me. Peering through my telescope, I saw Laura standing outside. I opened the door, and she squeezed past me, entering the room. Turning to me, she asked, "Where were you Friday night? Why didn't you answer the phone?" Closing the door, I faced her and inquired, "Which question do you want me to tackle first?" "What?" she responded. There were 3 questions. Which one should I answer first? "Don't sugarcoat it, Rob. What's up?" she pressed. "All right, I'll answer them in my preferred order then. First, where I've been. Mostly here, though I did hit up a frat party Saturday night. Next, why I didn't pick up the phone. Simple, I didn't hear it because you didn't call. Yeah, my bad for unplugging it. Now, where were you Friday night? Right here, ordered pizza and dove into a great book. Why didn't you give me a heads up that you weren't coming?" she demanded. "I figured you were busy with your boyfriend." "I assumed boyfriend? What are you on about, Rob? You're my boyfriend." "Huh. Then who were you cozying up to at the restaurant on Thursday?" she questioned. "Just a friend." "We weren't in love." "You were sitting close, leaning on him, and he had his arm around you. That's not lovey-dovey?" "Then what is it?" "It's meaningless, Rob. We're just friends." "If you don't see any problem, Laura, why didn't you come over and say hi or invite me to join you? Introduce me to your friend. Have a chat with me before heading off on a date." "Maybe you hesitated because then he'd question who I was, and you didn't want to explain. Why didn't you approach me if it bothered you?" "Because I wanted to observe your behavior, see how you act." "Why would you want to do that?" "Because I've heard too much about your dating life when I'm not around. Heard you've been out with guys on nights we had plans, so yeah, I wanted to see how you interacted with another guy." "You don't control me, Rob. Nowhere does it say we're exclusive." "I thought we did, Laura. I recall giving you my ring and letter sweater to show we were committed." "A sweater and a ring? Seriously, Rob, that's so juvenile." "Maybe, but it happened in high school. And when we graduated, you didn't return them and say, 'School's over, so we're done.' But if you feel it doesn't bind you, I can see it the same way. I met a nice girl at the party and she gave me her number, so I guess I can call her now." Laura's expression turned sour and she spat, "Go ahead, I don't care," before storming off. Watching her leave, I realized she didn't make excuses, promise not to repeat her actions, or reassure me of her loyalty. She had transitioned from a schoolgirl to a grown woman, and she demanded a change. It was tough given our history, but addressing her feelings now was wiser than ignoring them. Busy with homework from Monday to Wednesday, I finally reached out to Robin on Thursday. After chatting, we arranged a date for Friday night. I picked her up, we dined, and instead of a movie, she suggested attending a party she knew about. Arriving at the Belleville apartment around 8, fate played its hand. Laura and the guy she'd been with on Thursday were the first faces I saw. "Oh, damn," I muttered. "What's wrong?" Robin inquired. "Them." I gestured at Laura and the guy. "Do you know them?" "I know her. Miss Piggy, yeah, that's her nickname." "How come?" She's promiscuous, earned the label Miss Piggy. Are you sure about that? What else do you call someone who's committed but still entertains other men when her partner's away? Are you certain about that? Especially regarding the rumors? Honestly, I can't confirm firsthand, but several guys claim they've had flirty encounters with her. You didn't mention how you know her. I'm the guy she was supposed to marry until I caught her last Thursday with the guy she's with now. Oh boy, can we expect drama? No, we split on Sunday, so we're officially done. What are the odds I'd hear from you if Thursday hadn't happened? Slim to none. But Thursday did. And we're here to enjoy ourselves. So shall we? She took my hand and led me to meet the host. Laura, initially off to the side, looked shocked upon seeing me at the party. Whether because she didn't anticipate seeing me here or because she was caught with a new boyfriend, I'm not sure. Ignoring her, Robin introduced me to Gary and his wife, Artist, and we chatted briefly before getting drinks. The basement had become a dance floor. Robin and I danced, mingled, and had a blast. Whenever I glimpsed Laura, her expression was inscrutable. Around 11, Robin suggested we leave due to her Saturday plans. After bidding farewell to our hosts, I drove Robin home. Your ex seemed fixated on you today, she remarked. Probably caught off guard to see me there. No, I sensed she was uneasy seeing you with someone else. Tough luck, she's the reason our relationship ended. Perhaps, but I don't think she's thrilled about it. Maybe not, but she'll need to adjust. Does that mean I'll see more of you or that you'll start seeing other girls? I prefer to date one girl at a time. I enjoyed tonight and I'll ask you out again. If you're on board, you'll be the only one. What if I'm not ready for something exclusive? Then you'll decline and I'll find someone else to date. If she says no too, I'll check back with you. If you still decline, I'll continue until I find someone who's always a yes. I like your approach and I'm open to it. How about tomorrow night? Sounds good. I escorted her to the door, bid her good night, and as I turned to depart, she halted me, requesting a moment. Facing her again, she confessed, I never kiss on the first date, but I suppose there's a first time for everything, and kissed me. See you tomorrow, she called out as she headed home. Upon returning home, Dad informed me that Laura had called, expressing distress. I explained it was too late to return her call and promised to do so in the morning. As per my routine, Saturday morning, I slept in, and when I finally made it to the kitchen for coffee, Mom urged me to call Laura. She's called twice already this morning. Not until I've had my coffee. Are things okay between you two? It's more complicated now. Does she know? She should, it was her decision. Just then, the phone rang. Mom answered, saying it was for me. It's Laura. I picked up and greeted her. Yes. Why didn't you call? I got in too late last night to call and I just woke up. That's not what I meant. Why didn't you call me last night for our usual Friday date? We discussed this last Sunday, Laura. You said we weren't exclusive and agreed to see other people. I told you if you did, I would too, and you left in a hurry. That's not what I intended, Rob. You should have understood that. Don't feed me that, Laura. You were clearly with that guy I saw you with last Thursday. I wasn't with him, Rob. I went to that party alone, and he happened to be there. Sure, Laura. Believe what you want, but it doesn't change anything. I'm hearing things about you and what happened, like how you got the nickname Miss Piggy. I don't know what you've heard, Rob, but it's false. Why shouldn't I believe it after seeing you with your friend at the restaurant? And I don't buy that you coincidentally bumped into him at the party. He was too close to you and hugging you when I arrived. No, Laura, you're not committed to just me, and I'm not interested in being one of many. Please return the ring and the letter sweater. It seems they hold no significance to you, unlike in high school. I'll catch you later. Goodbye. That seems pretty conclusive, my mom remarked. She decided that being exclusive with me wasn't enough, and as I just said, I'm not interested in being one of many. During all this, I found solace in Robin's company. Jim's letters arrived every couple of weeks, updating me on his life. He graduated from boot camp and entered specialized training, joining a Navy construction battalion, also known as the Navy Seabees. He mastered both building and demolition. He never inquired about Annabelle, so in my responses, I omitted her too. I knew he wouldn't want to hear about her. Within a week of his deployment, Annabelle was already pursuing someone she met at a party. A month later, she moved in with a coworker. 3 months after that, another move, she started cohabiting with a man she met when he towed her car to the store. Rumors circulated that he made her entertain his friends at his apartment. Then, Annabelle vanished without a trace until I received a letter from Jim. He had completed his training and was stationed permanently in Norfolk. Upon his arrival, he summoned Annabelle to join him. I wish you could be my best man, but we had little time to prepare. The sooner we wed, the sooner we can secure housing on base. Poor guy. I feared the moment you left she'd have another man before the door's echo faded. I wasn't lacking money, thanks to my grandparents, who had set up a college fund for me since birth. It had enough to cover tuition and rent for an off-campus apartment if I chose so. At the start of junior year, Robin and I moved in together, giving me a taste of family life, which I adored. After about 6 months, I began considering making our arrangement permanent. I still harbored doubts that what Robin and I shared was too perfect to be true. Yet she showed no signs of wavering in our relationship until the day I mentioned searching for an engagement ring. That's when she revealed her plan. To return to California after graduation to marry her childhood sweetheart, now studying in England on a Rhodes Scholarship. They both acknowledged each other's situations, including his relationship with an English woman. We recognized that abstaining from physical closeness for several years wasn't realistic for two healthy young adults. Hence, we agreed to an open relationship. It shouldn't immediately impact us, Rob, she assured. However, it did, especially me. Essentially, I felt yanked from what I thought was a romantic partnership into more of a friendship. The issue was I didn't find satisfaction in casual flings. I craved more than just physical connection. As a result, Robin and I gradually grew apart. Nearly 4 months to the day after Robin dashed my romantic hopes, she remarked, "You don't seem content here, do you?" I admitted feeling uneasy and explained why. "I'm sorry, darling. Sometimes I wish I didn't love Alex so much so I could fulfill your desires more. If it weren't for him, you'd be my partner. Thanks, I suppose. So what's the plan? Shall we flip a coin to decide who stays and who goes?" "No need." I anticipated this moment. Mom hasn't rented out my room yet. She decided to keep it for me, at least until I'm 40 or until she has grandchildren. So you're staying and I'm leaving. Friends always. After a hug, she requested, "Last night, please." I'd been back home for a week. On Friday evening, while working on an article in my room, Mom called from downstairs. "Rob, someone's here to see you." Descending, I found Laura conversing with Mom. Mom nodded at me, saying, "I'll leave you two alone," and retreated to the kitchen. "Hi, Rob." "Hi, Laura, how are you?" "Okay, I guess, hoping things will improve." "Oh, Robin called, mentioned you're back on the market, and hinted I should hurry if I want to be first in line." Why I for the first spot? Why I for it all? There wouldn't be a line if I hadn't acted foolishly. In fact, Robin wouldn't even exist. "I'm not vying for a spot, Rob. I just want to return to where I belong." "Where's that?" She lifted her left hand, revealing, "I never returned your ring." My class ring adorned her left ring finger. "There's a party at Alice Johnson's tonight. Want to go with me?" She dangled the idea, adding, "Just so everyone's clear, I've staked my claim. I've got you back, and I'm broadcasting it." The real surprise came post-party. She remained quiet as I drove her home, gazing out the passenger window. When we reached her house, I suggested apartment hunting on Saturday. Renting an apartment is more economical than constant motel stays. "Are you asking if I want to move in with you?" "It's crossed my mind." "What time?" "Around 9. "Great, you've got yourself a date." Laura and I settled into a 2-bedroom apartment situated roughly midway between Ann Arbor and Ypsilanti. We converted the second bedroom into an office, housing Laura's computer desk alongside mine. Around a month post-move, Jim returned home on a 30-day leave, spending ample time with Laura and me. Seeing Jim and Annabelle together, they seemed to gel well, making me question my earlier suspicions about her. However, 3 weeks after Jim returned to duty, Annabelle showed up. With Jim deployed to Iraq, Annabelle opted not to wait for his return to base. She vanished for 2 weeks, staying with her current partner. Upon her visit to Jim in Norfolk 3 weeks later, rumors resurfaced about her liaison with a former flame, including alleged revelries and hosting group encounters. I contemplated confronting her, but Laura dissuaded me, asserting it was none of our concern. Besides, as far as we knew, Jim and Annabelle had an open relationship, a not uncommon arrangement during prolonged military separations. Laura doubted Jim would consent to such an agreement, but advising him of Annabelle's behavior might backfire. Instead, she suggested I let it be. Jim returned from Afghanistan just in time to serve as my best man at my wedding to Laura. Afterwards, he and Annabelle relocated to Norfolk, where he completed the last 9 months of his military service. Upon discharge, they returned home, and Jim secured a job with a construction company as a heavy equipment operator. Over the next 2 years, the Marshalls, Jim and Annabelle, became regular guests in our home, visiting us at least once every fortnight. There were no signs of trouble between Jim and Annabelle, and there was no indication of infidelity on her part. Laura's theory seemed plausible, especially when the company Jim worked for won a contract to lay a pipeline in Alaska. Given the harsh conditions at the construction site, Jim opted to leave Annabelle at home for the 4-month duration of his assignment. However, barely a week later, Annabelle was spotted in a motel room with Gary Mellows, the owner of Jim's company. Subsequently, Gary's car was frequently seen parked in Jim's driveway almost every night of the week. Complications arose with the Alaska project, extending Jim's absence by another 2 months. Coincidentally, Laura and Annabelle shared the same doctor, and Laura happened to be at the doctor's office the day Annabelle received distressing news. She was 7 weeks pregnant, and Jim had been away for over 3 months. Laura learned about Annabelle's pregnancy from 2 nurses who had attended school with us. Aware of Laura's connection to Annabelle, they inquired how she thought Jim would react to the news. In the realm of gossip among friends, patient confidentiality sometimes takes a back seat. Laura speculated briefly before suggesting Jim may never learn the truth of my suspicions. Annabelle will likely opt for infanticide, resolving the situation before Jim returns. However, events unfolded differently. Someone whom Laura wouldn't dissuade informed Jim of the situation. Upon his return, Jim rented a car and discreetly parked nearby until he witnessed Mellows arriving at his house and entering with Annabelle. After waiting 15 minutes, allowing them time to engage, Jim entered the house with a digital camera, capturing evidence of their affair. Subsequently, an ambulance responded to an emergency call, and Mellows was hospitalized. When the police arrived, they initially intended to detain Jim until he presented the photographic evidence. Jim had used a Canon Rebel camera set to continuous mode, which captured Mellows lunging at him in the series of images. He might have simply aimed to retrieve the camera from Jim's possession, but based on the sequence of photos, it was evident to Jim that he was under attack and merely defending himself. The police accepted this explanation and departed. 20 minutes later, Annabelle emerged onto the porch with a single suitcase, locking the door behind her. The divorce proceeded smoothly, as did the lawsuit filed against Mellows for causing alienation of affection. Additionally, Jim filed a molestation suit against Mellows, alleging that Mellows had hired him only to send him out of town and then move in with his wife. Mellows had the option to settle out of court, avoiding public attention, but he chose to contest the case, resulting in his actions with the employee's wife becoming public knowledge. Following an extended absence from town, the jury ruled in Jim's favor, awarding him $1.3 million. After settling legal fees and taxes, he retained slightly over $750,000. He used this to pay off the house, install an in-ground pool, and purchase a new Ford F-350. Once the divorce was finalized, Annabelle vanished from view, rumored to have relocated out of town. To resolve the lawsuit, Mellows had to sell off some assets and property. Additionally, he suffered a loss of business as some customers and potential buyers deemed him untrustworthy due to his actions towards his employees' spouse. Jim still had some funds remaining and proposed to me the idea of starting my own company and taking over the business that Mellows had forfeited. I would handle the design while Jim would manage construction. After careful consideration with Laura, we decided to proceed, leading to the establishment of R&J Constructors. As partners, we've managed to thrive. Not only did we attract many clients who had left Mellows, but we also outperformed him on several projects. With human nature being what it is, Jim ensured everyone was aware whenever we outperformed Mellows. The subsequent 5 years passed swiftly. While Jim explored various relationships, he never found someone he wanted to commit to long-term. He spent considerable time with Laura and me, typically joining us once a week with his girlfriend. Things were going exceedingly well. Laura had ascended the corporate ladder, achieving the position of regional manager and emerging as a frontrunner for the vice president role. I believed things couldn't improve further, and unfortunately, I was correct. On a Tuesday, as I wrapped up a lunch meeting with a prospective client, Gary Mellows approached and asked if he could buy me a drink. Personally, I held no ill will towards Gary. I reasoned that if someone like Annabelle, whom I considered less than reputable, offered solace to a lonely individual like Gary, it wasn't fair to fault him for accepting. I never bought into the narrative about Gary orchestrating Jim's departure for Annabelle's sake. Knowing Annabelle's character, I speculated she might have visited Gary's office to collect Jim's paycheck and expressed her loneliness due to his absence. In any case, Gary's issues were tied to Jim, not me, so I accepted his offer for a drink. Once he settled in, he inquired, "How's everything going?" "Could be better," I replied. "Perhaps you'll contemplate selling," he proposed. "Selling? Why on earth would I do that?" I retorted. "To make your pal Jim my business partner," he suggested. "Are you out of your mind?" I exclaimed. "Not really. Take a look at this." he said, opening his briefcase and presenting a folder to me. I accepted it, opened it, and was taken aback. The folder contained a photo of Laura and Jim holding hands as they entered a motel room. Several more images depicted them entering or exiting the motel room, along with a handful showing them embracing and kissing in various locations. I glanced up at Gary, who explained, "Apologies. I was tailing him to gather evidence for revenge. When the private investigator handed me those photos, I didn't know she was your spouse. I only discerned from the rings in the picture that she belonged to someone else, so I hired a PI to uncover her identity to prepare for my retaliation." "Why you were involved," I pointed out. "You followed his orders?" Gary countered, "No, I didn't." I refuted. "Yes, I had a fling with his wife, but I never orchestrated his departure to pursue her." She entered my office, shut the door, and began undressing. Meeting her gaze, she declared, "Since you sent Jim away, you'll have to look after me until he returns." Being unattached, I had to decline Annabelle. To me, this entire debacle is Jim's responsibility. Initially, everyone's aware of Annabelle's promiscuity, a trait she's carried since high school. Jim should have been aware, but he didn't act on it. "No, Rob, he hit me hard with that lawsuit, and I intend to retaliate. I'm just sorry you're caught in the middle." Any idea how long this has been going on? According to the private investigator's findings, it's been at least a year, possibly longer. How could it have gone unnoticed for so long? If she never raised suspicions, how could you uncover it? So why the interest in buying me out? What's the benefit of becoming Jim's partner? Consider it equal partnership. I'll have an equal say. If he proposes plan A, I'll advocate for plan B. No matter his preference, I'll oppose it. Plus, I'll oversee pricing and ensure our rates undercut the competition. I'll drive the company into bankruptcy, and Jim will suffer the consequences. But you will too. Not entirely. I've done my due diligence. If the business collapses, we'll liquidate assets, and I'll recoup most of my investment. I won't profit, unless you count earnings from my other ventures undercutting Jim's bids. But I won't endure substantial losses either. What if he resorts to molestation until you sell your share? Last time, he caught me with his wife, and I prioritized seizing the camera over self-defense. If he tries again, it won't be as easy for him. In fact, I'm confident I can handle him if necessary. So, are you interested? Possibly, but I want to conduct my own investigation first. If I decide to proceed, do you have a ballpark figure in mind? I proposed a sum and he deemed it feasible, advising me to contact him if I opt to move forward. I departed the meeting with Mellows feeling utterly shaken. How could Laura and Jim have carried on like this for nearly a year without me suspecting a thing? I had observed no signs of discontent from Laura, no decline in affection. Our life appeared unchanged, at least from my perspective. What had gone awry? While I trusted Detective Gary's findings and evidence, I couldn't dismiss the possibility of tampered photos and Gary's personal motives. I needed certainty before taking action. Returning to the office, I reached out to a friend at an insurance agency for recommendations on investigative services. Armed with this, I arranged a meeting, and 13 days later I felt assured. On purported work trips, Jim rendezvoused with Laura at the Comfort Inn on Melrose. How she managed time off from work for these liaisons eluded me. Now I had to determine my course of action. Though my desired path was clear, I just needed to devise a strategy. After 2 hours with a lawyer, I had a clear understanding of my options and obligations. With no fault grounds, assets would be divided evenly. Concerned about Laura's share of proceeds from selling my stake in the company, I realized deception might be necessary. Even so, she'd still receive some of the proceeds. I struck a deal with Mellows to officially sell him my stake in the company for 1/3 of its actual value. 1/3 of the payment went into a bank account solely in my name, while the remaining 2/3 were deposited into an offshore account I'd arranged. The agreement stipulated that Mellows wouldn't appear at the office or occupy my desk until the morning I handed Laura and Jim the necessary documents. Laura filed for divorce, citing infidelity, while Jim pursued a case for alienation of affection. Despite residing in a no-fault state, I could still pursue legal action for infidelity, potentially resulting in a slightly more favorable division of assets, though not a 50-50th split. To substantiate the claim of infidelity, evidence was crucial. Examination of reports from both Gary's private investigator and mine revealed consistent rendezvous at the same motel, always on Wednesdays. My detective secured a room for surveillance, incentivizing the porter to ensure Laura and Jim were assigned to that specific room. On Wednesday morning, I instructed Maria, our receptionist, to inform Jim that I'd be absent due to a dentist appointment and to mention the possibility of my continued absence in the afternoon if I didn't feel well after the procedure. After the effects of the gas wore off, I exited the house and returned after Laura had left for work. The locksmith arrived promptly at 9 to change all the locks. Once he finished, I headed to the bank and emptied out both the accounts and the safe. My lawyer advised taking only half, but my mood was unwaveringly resolute. Screw you, Laura. I had no intention of making things easy for her. She'd have to fight for her share. Eventually, I also withdrew the funds I expected from the business. If it proved excessive, Jim could contest it in court, but until then, it was mine. My detective phoned at 12:10 to report that the couple had checked into room 128. I drove over, had a brief chat with the detective, then stationed myself on the hood of a nearby car waiting for them to emerge. After a tense encounter, I drove away. Just as I was leaving, a man approached them and handed over the papers. Alongside the divorce papers, Laura received a temporary restraining order mandating her to stay 500 feet away from me in the house. Securing it required a bit of trickery. I had to fabricate a story, claiming a third party had tipped me off about Jim and Laura discussing my insurance coverage and business shares value. A hearing was pending to decide if the restraining order would become permanent, but it might take a few weeks. It was just another tactic to unsettle Laura. The crucial point was that she couldn't enter the house without court supervision, and I had no intention of making myself available to make keys for the new locks. Along with Jim's papers for the foreclosure attachment suit was a brief note. "You're familiar with how these suits go, aren't you? How does it feel to be on the receiving end?" Driving away from the motel, I called Gary on his cell phone. "Everything's arranged. Have a good first day at the office tomorrow." I drove to the airport, parked in the long-term lot, stashed my cell phone in the glove compartment, and boarded the flight to Cabo San Lucas. After a week of scuba diving and beach lounging, I returned home. Upon switching on my phone, I found it inundated with voicemails. Most were from Laura, as expected, but there were also 4 from Jim. You'd think he'd be the last person eager to talk to me. Nevertheless, I had no interest in conversing with either of them. Would I desire an explanation? Naturally, I'd want to understand why. Yet I had resolved to leave them in the past and focus on moving forward. Their reasons for betrayal were not something I wished to dwell on. My attorney was aware of my week-long absence, so I decided to inform him of my return. He suggested I contact Laura, who had been trying to reach me twice daily to access the house and retrieve my belongings under court supervision. I was about to instruct him to make arrangements with the court to allow her entry when a different idea dawned on me, a chance to further unsettle her. I phoned her and inquired about her needs. "I need my clothes and other items, but I can't enter the house even with court supervision because I lack a key and they won't let me break in," she explained. "You have nothing there to take," I countered. "I donated everything to Goodwill. I don't want any reminders of your deceitful behavior. There's nothing of yours left, not even a stray hair clip." She retorted, "You had no right to do that." "I had every right, just as you had the right to betray me." "We need to talk," I responded. "It's not what you think," she pleaded. "Be honest, Laura. I know you weren't happy with Jim. I'm sure of it. Goodbye, Laura." I ended the call. Although Laura's belongings remained in the house, I was intentionally delaying her retrieval. It was my way of unsettling her, ensuring she wouldn't get her things back anytime soon. I've always had a good rapport with Maria, our multitasking receptionist, secretary, bookkeeper, cook, and cleaner, so I phoned her to check in. Not too bad for me, but things aren't going well for the company. There's constant bickering between Gary and Jim over trivial matters. Jim gives orders, and Gary refuses to comply. Orders get placed and canceled in quick succession. Work sits idle while they sort out their disputes. I was fed up, so I handed in my resignation last Friday. But Gary offered to double my salary if I stayed, so I decided against leaving. They even got into a physical altercation last Thursday, but there was no clear winner, although Jim ended up with a broken nose. "Why did you leave us? Why side with Gary?" I shared the entire saga with her. She fell silent for a moment before responding, "Now I have another reason to stick around." "And what's that?" "I can assist Gary. I never cared for Jim. He persistently flirted with me despite knowing I was engaged. Once he even insinuated that he'd let me go if I agreed to a date with him. We both know what he meant by date. When I questioned what you would think of him letting me go, he fell silent. You should have informed me." "Why?" "It was a personal issue, and I handled it. I sympathize with you and Laura, Rob, but there might be a positive aspect to it, at least for me." "Or how's that?" "It means you're available again. How do you feel about being pursued? Weren't you engaged?" "I was, until I caught that idiot doing to me what he did to you." "When did it happen?" "About 3 weeks ago." Well, honey, if you're interested, I'll consider you first when I start dating again, but that won't happen for a while. I won't give Laura any ammunition. I can wait, but keep me in mind if you ever feel lonely and want company for dinner. I will, sweetie, and thank you. My phone rang 16 times that day, 14 calls from Laura and 2 from Jim. I couldn't imagine anything that guy could say that I'd want to hear. If he was calling to ask for something, it definitely wasn't from me. I deleted all the calls and went home, made myself dinner, then on a whim I called Gary Mellows to check on his scheme. Not bad at all. I made sure to be at your desk when he arrived at work. He saw me, frowned, and demanded to know why I was in the office and sitting at your desk. I chuckled and informed him that I was his new partner. The look on his face was priceless. You could practically see the steam coming out of his ears as he perused a copy of our agreement. I got us off to a proper start. Almost immediately, he called for a fuel truck because the front-end loader and other equipment at Wilkins's site had run out of diesel fuel. Once he left the office, I phoned and canceled the order. One of the loaders ran out of fuel, and Jim called Allied and gave them an earful. They informed him that I canceled the order and that they wouldn't tolerate such behavior from him, suggesting he find fuel elsewhere. That's when he approached me, demanding to know what I was doing. I explained that Allied was overcharging us, and I was seeking a better price, and things went downhill from there. A little birdie told me you two ended up in a fistfight. Indeed. It all concluded last Thursday. And the outcome? I may have been a tad optimistic when I mentioned I thought I could take him, but I got past it and gave him a good punching. Well, carry on, and best of luck with your plan. After hanging up, I headed to the room I'd turned into an office, fired up my computer, and began drafting my resume. I planned to kickstart my job hunt the following day. As I typed away on the keyboard, the doorbell chimed. Opening the door, I found Jim standing there. What the hell do you want? We need to talk, Rob. No, you don't, creep. It's not my fault, Rob. She came on to me. She caught me in a bad mood because of what Annabelle did to me. I wasn't thinking straight, Rob. I'm sorry, Rob, but it wasn't my fault. I didn't pursue her. But you knew she was my wife. You knew how you felt when you found out about Annabelle, and you didn't even stop to think you'd make me feel the same way, did you? You had to know I'd find out sooner or later, probably the same way you found out about Annabelle, someone told you. Well, creep, somebody told me. You're a scoundrel, as far as I'm concerned. You're supposed to be my friend. And even if I believe Laura made a move on you, which I don't, you should have turned her down. Just like I turned Annabelle away when she made advances on me. You knew you were better than that, but you went ahead anyway. And even if she initiated it and caught you off guard, that doesn't excuse the second, third, fourth, and however many times after that. No, you stabbed me in the back, plain and simple. Why did you load me up with Mellows? Because in the mood I was in when I found out and the rage I felt, if I'd come after you, things might have ended differently. But you're not worth going to jail over. Besides, involving Mellows will bring you grief that will last far longer than any consequences from a physical altercation. But you know what? The rage I felt at the time is gone. And that's when I punched him. I grabbed his shirt, pulled him into the house, slammed the door shut, and unleashed my anger on him. He was unconscious when I dragged him out and put him in the car. You wouldn't believe the grin on my face when I got back inside. I might have the police showing up, but I wasn't concerned. I could simply say he attacked me, and I acted in self-defense. I'll refer to his altercation with Mellows and claim he's upset because I sold my share of the business to Mellows, and he's trying to retaliate. The next day, I sent out 14 resumes and checked in with my attorney. He mentioned a hearing on the temporary restraining order set for the following Monday, but hadn't heard from Laura or her lawyer. Contemplating contacting Laura, I decided against it. Delaying her hiring a lawyer meant delaying any communication between us. Throughout the week, I received responses to my resumes and traveled for interviews in Atlanta on Wednesday and Baltimore on Thursday. Though I enjoyed both interviews, I also heard back from a San Diego company, sparking my interest in warmer climates. I scheduled an interview for the following Tuesday. Monday arrived with the restraining order hearing. Surprisingly, the judge found no grounds to uphold it, ordering me to grant Laura access to the house. Laura attended with her lawyer, attempting to speak with me. I stepped aside, sought my lawyer's assistance, and returned to her side. You wait until my attorney arrives before speaking to me, I insisted. I just wanted to inform you I'll be coming tonight, she replied. No, you won't. I have a job interview at 2:30 and won't return until Wednesday. You can visit after 6. Her lawyer began to speak, but I interjected. She will not step foot in this house without supervision. A court representative will oversee everything, and you're welcome to have your attorney present too. No, that's not satisfactory. They won't understand what she's taking. If she grabs something inappropriate, I'll have to fight to retrieve it. She was away for 2 weeks, and another 48 hours won't injure her, I stated. Firmly. Her lawyer sighed. Then let's await the judge's decision. As he turned to leave, Laura intervened. Forget it. I can wait. I nodded and said, Wednesday at 6, before departing. Wait a moment, Rob. Can we have a conversation? No, I replied, exiting the building. Satisfied with my interview in San Diego, I returned home eagerly anticipating news from them. At 6, Laura arrived, accompanied by a representative from her lawyer's office. The court-appointed woman arrived at 2:06, and during those 20 minutes we conversed over coffee. She explained her role as an observer for the court, tasked with inventorying seized items and noting disputed ones. I assured her there was no need for a list of disputed items. She could take whatever she wanted. If that's your stance, why did you take a firm position against her? She betrayed me, and she did it with someone who had been my best friend for over 25 years. I couldn't retaliate physically without facing legal consequences, but I had to do something to retaliate and inflict some pain on her. It wasn't much, but it was something. As the doorbell rang, I ushered Laura and her accompanying man from the lawyer's office inside, then stepped outside to mow the lawn. When I returned indoors, everyone had left except Laura, who sat at the kitchen table, sipping tea. She glanced up as I entered. You deceived me. You didn't donate any of my belongings to Goodwill. Perhaps not, but I relish seeing your reaction when you claimed I had no right to do so. I hadn't anticipated everything ending up belonging to her. It'll take me longer to sort it out than I thought. I retrieved my key ring from my pocket, took out my house key, and extended it across the table to her. No need to move. You can collect the keys on Friday. Friday? I'll have vacated the premises by then. Why? I'm interviewing and I'm relocating as soon as I secure a job. I mean, why take those actions if you intended to give me the house and leave? What's with the restraining order and the falsehoods about disposing of my belongings? That's a naive question. After what you put me through, I had to retaliate somehow. Just be grateful I opted for a peaceful resolution rather than a violent one. Just because I refrained from attacking you doesn't absolve you, but it's the best recourse I had without facing legal repercussions. I remember you declined when I asked if we could talk tonight, but I'm still going to make an attempt to persuade you that divorce isn't necessary. Let's be realistic, Laura. After what you've done, there's absolutely no way we can salvage our marriage. But that doesn't change my feelings for you, Rob. I love you, and you know it. What happened with Jim was a mistake, just a foolish mistake. I've always liked Jim, but my feelings for him don't compare to the love I have for you. Your feelings for Jim don't matter. The fact remains you had a good time with him, regardless of whether you loved him. It still constitutes infidelity, and you shouldn't doubt how I feel about that. Just remember how devastated I was when I found out about Annabelle and Jim. I was so upset that I considered telling him, but you convinced me otherwise. That should have made it clear how I would feel if you did the same to me. And don't give me excuses like you didn't want me to find out. Cheaters always get caught, always. Jim discovered the truth about Annabelle because someone witnessed them together and informed him. It's the same way I found out about you and Jim going into that motel room. Doesn't my love for you matter? No, Laura, it doesn't, because it wasn't enough to prevent you from betraying me. But Rob, it didn't mean anything. Truly, it was insignificant. It was an unforeseen circumstance, an accident. How could having relations with my former best friend be classified as an accident? He visited our home while you were in Santa Fe. He was distraught about Annabelle. Even after cutting her out of his life, he still longed for her. We had a drink, and as he began to cry, I embraced him, trying to console him. I recall thinking, this is so wrong. I shouldn't be doing this. Yet it felt oddly comforting. I must admit, it felt strangely exhilarating. The next time you were out of town, Jim came by, and we both understood his intentions, and we resumed our liaison. There was no love involved, Rob. As cliché as it sounds, it was purely physical, just a fleeting thrill in my life. Throughout it all, I never neglected you. I love you sincerely, Rob, and you know it. We can overcome this. Divorce isn't necessary. Love has no bearing on this, Laura. I need a divorce. I can't coexist with someone who has betrayed me. It's straightforward, Laura. You betrayed my trust. If I stayed, I'd be vigilantly monitoring you, anticipating another transgression. By your own admission, you continued because you found pleasure in the deceit. You can make all the promises you want about not repeating it, but your assurances hold no weight. You pledged to forsake all others when we wed, and you broke that vow. I find it hard to trust anything you say, Laura. Jim's version of events completely contradicts yours. According to him, it wasn't an accident. He says you were actively playing a game with him. Either he's lying or you are. The issue is that after what both of you did, neither of you is trustworthy to me, so I can't favor one story over the other. The bottom line, Laura, is that we've broken up as a couple. I'm not giving up, Rob. I'm going to fight for the divorce. I know we can get through this because we love each other. You're mad at me right now, and I get that. But I can make a promise to you and keep it, especially now that I understand what breaking that promise could cost me. My lawyer says he can get the court to order counseling, and I know that can help. I love you, Rob, and I'm not letting you go. You don't seem to understand that I don't want you right now. Okay, I'll admit that I still love you, and it'll take me a while to get over it, but there's no way I can live with you again. Every time I go to bed with you, I'll think about you being with that idiot who was my best friend, and I can't live like that. You won't fight for a divorce from Laura because if you do, I will release the videotape of your last meeting with Jim. Every family member, every friend, and all your CO workers will get a copy. I will create your own adult site for you, and there are dozens of amateur adult sites where I can post it. And I will do it with your full name and address. It'll make your life very interesting. Crap, Rob. No such video exists. Oh no, wait here. I went to the den where I had my briefcase, pulled out a copy of the disc, went back to the kitchen and handed it to her. Take a look at it. After you watch it, decide if you want someone else to watch it. Now, if you don't mind, there's something I need to do. You can pick up the house on Friday, but for now, you have to go. On Thursday and Friday, I moved out of the house and put most of my stuff in storage. Then I rented a room at the executive suites for a month, hoping to have a job by the end of it. Over the next 2 weeks, I traveled to Salt Lake City, Philadelphia, Atlanta, Chicago, and Detroit for interviews, all of which I felt good about, but I didn't hear back from any of them. I sat down at my desk, calculated my finances, and realized I could live without a job for about 6 years. I started looking into other cities and states with a lower cost of living, hoping to stretch those 6 years to 8, maybe 10. Laura signed the divorce papers and returned them to my attorney. I almost regretted that she did that. I would have loved to scatter a CD of her and Jim all over the house, but a deal is a deal. We agreed on a 50/50 division of the property, with each party paying their own attorney fees. Since I filed the suit, I paid the legal fees. Laura wanted the house, and my half of the equity was slightly more than what I had borrowed from the bank, so that worked out. True, I had to give Laura half of what I got from selling my half of the company, but I had planned for that. She claimed I sold out too cheaply, but it didn't matter because the other 2/3 of what I got from the sale was safely tucked away. I heard some interesting gossip. Apparently, as soon as I was out of the picture, Jim started intimidating Laura so relentlessly that she had to get a restraining order against him. Not that I cared, of course, but it amused me. I decided to wait until the divorce was finalized before taking any action. Eventually, I began receiving calls from some of the companies where I had interviewed. A company in San Diego called, asking me to return for another interview. However, before I could call to arrange it, Gary contacted me. How would you like your company back? Why would I want my company back? I sold it to you so I could go back to Jay and leave him behind. Why would I want to become his partner again? You wouldn't want to, but you don't have to. After our last argument, I said, if you're so unhappy with me as a partner, I'll either buy you out or sell your half to someone else. He thought for about 30 seconds and then asked how much I'd pay for his half. He accepted half of what I gave you. The question remains, why should I want the company back? If you've done even half of what you said you would to sabotage Jim, the company might not be worth much now. You could be surprised. Come to the office and let's talk. I figured I had nothing to lose, so I went to see him. When I walked in, Maria jumped up from her desk and hugged me, then poked her head into Gary's office to tell him I had arrived. As you know, I only bought you out to mess with Marshall. I didn't really need him, but things are changing. I'm getting more into the construction side of the business. I want to move away from the engineering part. On one hand, I couldn't get the engineers I wanted, so I started considering alternatives. The solution that came to mind was to call you and ask you to set up a company that I would contract with for the engineering work. But then Marshall sold me the company, and I thought, why not just sell it to you and contract with you? I can't afford to buy out both my half and Jim's half. You won't have to pay much because the company isn't worth much anymore. Since I own everything, I've transferred all the construction work and equipment to my other company. What's left is purely the engineering part. I'll sell you the company for what I paid Jim and sign a 5-year contract for engineering services. Plus, the company still has contracts with about 15 other firms. I don't see how you can lose. How much did you give Jim? He told me, and it was less than I had in my offshore account. But there is one condition. And what's that? I asked. I have no secrets from Maria, and I shared the idea with her. She said that if you agree, she will stay with you and not move to my company. If you accept the deal, you will keep her on your team. I didn't have to think long, and I told him that I would agree to the deal, but I wouldn't do it until my divorce was finalized, which would be in about 3 weeks at the earliest. Gary said that was fine with him, and we agreed to the deal. As I was leaving the office, Maria said, "I heard. Don't forget that at the end of those 3 weeks you promised I would be first on the list." "I didn't think you were serious about that." "You can rest assured I am," she said with a 1,000-watt smile. As I pulled away from the curb, my cell phone rang, and it was my lawyer. Jim had learned his lesson from what happened to Gary when Gary sued Jim and called my lawyer with an offer to settle the case. I told the lawyer to accept it. I made it the rest of the way to my room at the executive suites with a huge smile on my face. In 3 weeks, I could start a new life with a new job, a new girlfriend, and money in the bank. I could spend those 3 weeks looking for a place to live and shopping for furniture. Who says nice guys always finish last? My spoiled older sister showed up at my house, begging to stay because her husband had kicked her out. However, I soon discovered that she was the one who had been abusive and at fault. I, 29 female, have been living separately from my family for the past 6 years. My family consists of my mother, 55 female, and my older sister, Sarah, 32 female. Sarah was always my mom's favorite child, and this caused a lot of tension between us growing up. 6 years ago, I was forced to leave our family home due to a series of conflicts with Sarah. She had always been controlling and manipulative, often using her position as the favorite to get her way. The final straw came when she accused me of stealing money from our mother's purse. I didn't do it, but Sarah convinced our mom that I was lying. The atmosphere at home became unbearable, with constant arguments and distrust. Eventually, Sarah gave me an ultimatum. Either I confessed to the theft, which I didn't commit, or leave the house. I chose to leave, as I couldn't bear the thought of admitting to something I didn't do. For the past 6 years, I've been living on my own, working hard to build a life for myself. I have a decent job as an accountant at a small firm, and I've managed to rent a small but comfortable apartment. I've had minimal contact with my family during this time. My mom occasionally calls to check in, but our conversations are usually short and superficial. I haven't spoken to Sarah at all since I left. Last week, on a rainy Tuesday evening, I heard a knock on my door. When I opened it, I was shocked to see Sarah standing there, soaking wet and crying. It had been so long since I'd seen her that, for a moment, I didn't even recognize her. She looked different, thinner, with dark circles under her eyes and a haunted look on her face. "Can I come in?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. I hesitated. The last time I'd seen Sarah, she had been yelling at me to get out of our family home. Now here she was, asking to come into mine. It felt surreal. After a moment, I stepped aside and let her in. Sarah stumbled into my apartment, leaving wet footprints on the floor. She collapsed onto my couch, still crying. I stood there awkwardly, not sure what to do. Part of me wanted to comfort her, but another part was still angry about the past. "What's going on, Sarah?" I finally asked. Between sobs, Sarah managed to explain that her husband had kicked her out. I was surprised to hear this. I knew she had gotten married about 3 years ago, but I hadn't been invited to the wedding and didn't know much about her husband. He's been abusive," Sarah choked out. "It's been getting worse and worse. Tonight he just lost it. He threw me out and said if I came back, he'd kill me." I felt a mix of emotions hearing this. On one hand, I was horrified that Sarah had been going through this. No one deserves to be in an abusive relationship. On the other hand, I couldn't help but feel a twinge of anger. Where was this vulnerability and honesty 6 years ago when she was accusing me of theft? "Why didn't you go to Mom's house?" I asked. Our mother's place was closer to where Sarah lived with her husband, and I knew Mom would welcome Sarah with open arms. Sarah looked up at me, her eyes red and puffy. I didn't want to worry her," she said. "She doesn't know about the abuse. I've been hiding it from her. I didn't want her to know I'd been kicked out." I felt conflicted. Part of me wanted to help Sarah, to be the bigger person and put our past behind us. But another part of me was screaming that this wasn't fair. Sarah had forced me out of our home, cut me off from our family, and now she expected me to take her in. "Sarah," I said slowly, "I don't know if I can help you. We haven't spoken in 6 years. You forced me to leave home, and now you show up here expecting." "What exactly?" Sarah's face crumpled. "I know," she whispered. "I know I have no right to ask for your help, but I didn't know where else to go. I'm scared and I'm alone, and I'm sorry for everything." I stood there, torn between my anger at the past and my concern for Sarah's current situation. I didn't know what to do. After much internal debate, I reluctantly agreed to let Sarah stay with me for a few days. She said she needed time to sort things out with a lawyer regarding her situation. I made it clear that this was temporary and that I wasn't getting involved in her personal matters. I continued with my normal routine, going to work and maintaining my own life. For 4 days, Sarah stayed in my spare room. We didn't talk much beyond necessary interactions. I could tell she wanted to discuss things more, but I kept my distance. The wounds from our past were still raw, and I wasn't ready to open up. On the 4th day, after work, I was walking to my car in the office parking lot when a man approached me. He introduced himself as John, Sarah's husband. I was immediately on guard, remembering Sarah's claims of abuse. However, what John told me next left me reeling. According to John, Sarah wasn't the victim she claimed to be. He said that he had recently discovered Sarah was having an affair with his friend, Tom. Apparently, Tom had been coming to their house frequently, mostly when John wasn't home. John found out about this and confronted Sarah, which led to a huge argument. He admitted to yelling at her to leave but denied any physical abuse. John went on to explain that Sarah had filed a domestic violence case against him. He seemed desperate as he told me that the only evidence that could prove his innocence was on a flash drive that Sarah had taken with her. This drive allegedly contained security camera footage from their home, showing Sarah with Tom and proving that John hadn't been abusive. I stood there stunned. Part of me wanted to dismiss John's story outright. After all, isn't this what abusers do? Try to discredit their victims. But another part of me remembered the Sarah I grew up with, manipulative, dishonest, always playing the victim when it suited her. John pleaded with me to help him. He asked if I could try to find the flash drive and, if necessary, testify in court about Sarah's past behavior and manipulative tendencies. He emphasized that he wasn't asking me to lie, just to share my experiences with Sarah if it came to that. I didn't give John an answer right away. I told him I needed time to think and process this information. He gave me his contact details and left, looking defeated. Now I'm torn. On one hand, if John is telling the truth, then Sarah is once again manipulating people and potentially ruining an innocent man's life. On the other hand, if Sarah is telling the truth, then by helping John, I could be aiding an abuser and putting my sister in danger. I haven't confronted Sarah about this yet. Part of me wants to search for the flash drive while she's out, but I know that would be a huge violation of privacy. Another part wants to just ask her outright about John's claims, but I'm afraid of how she might react if she is lying. Update: thank you for your advice on my last post. After much consideration, I decided to help John. I couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to this story than Sarah was letting on. I started by unobtrusively searching for the flash drive when Sarah was out, but I couldn't find it anywhere. I began to wonder if John had been mistaken about its existence. Then, one afternoon, I caught a break. I was working from home and saw Sarah using a flash drive on her laptop. When she was done, she carefully hid it in her suitcase. A few minutes later, she left the apartment, saying she had some errands to run. I know it was wrong, but I couldn't resist. I retrieved the flash drive from her suitcase and plugged it into my computer. What I found confirmed John's story. There were several video clips from their home security cameras. They showed Sarah with Tom, John's friend, in compromising situations. There were also recordings of arguments between Sarah and John, where she was clearly the aggressor and John was trying to de-escalate the situation. I felt sick to my stomach. Sarah had lied again, and this time she was trying to ruin an innocent man's life. I quickly made a copy of the flash drive's contents and returned the original to Sarah's suitcase. The next day I met with John and told him what I'd found. I agreed to testify if necessary, but hoped it wouldn't come to that. John was grateful and said he'd have his lawyer reach out if they needed my statement. The case went to court a few weeks later. John's lawyer presented the evidence from the flash drive along with testimony from neighbors who had witnessed Sarah's behavior. I didn't end up needing to testify, as the evidence was overwhelming. The judge dismissed Sarah's claims of abuse and instead scolded her for filing false charges. I thought I'd feel relieved when the truth came out, but I was unprepared for what happened next. Sarah was furious with me. She showed up at my apartment, screaming that I had betrayed her and ruined her life. She said she'd never forgive me and that I was dead to her. What shocked me even more was my mother's reaction. She called me, absolutely enraged. She criticized me for not supporting Sarah and for airing our family's dirty laundry in public. It became clear during our conversation that she had known about Sarah's affair and her plan to accuse John of abuse. She had been supporting Sarah's lies all along. I was devastated. I had always known my mother favored Sarah, but I never thought she'd go this far. It made me question every interaction I'd had with them over the years. In the aftermath, I've cut ties with both Sarah and my mother. It's been painful, but I know it's for the best. I can't have people in my life who would lie so easily and try to destroy someone else's life to cover up their own mistakes. John reached out to thank me again. He's doing okay, all things considered. He's filed for divorce and is working on rebuilding his life. As for me, I'm trying to process everything that's happened. I know I did the right thing by exposing the truth, but it's come at a great personal cost. I've lost what little family I had left, but I've also gained something valuable, the knowledge that I can trust my own judgment and stand up for what's right even when it's difficult. I'm not sure what the future holds, but I know I'll face it with a clear conscience. Thank you all for your support throughout this ordeal. It's meant more to me than you can know.
I'm 57 years old, and I've been happily married to my sweetheart for 26 years. We'll call her Lucy. She wasn't just my wife. She was also my friend from college. We knew each other for a decade before tying the knot. We were friends for 2 years. Then I pursued her romantically for another year. The rest of our years together were filled with beautiful moments. However, due to official circumstances, we had to live in different cities for several years. Despite the challenges of time and distance, Lucy and I have maintained a strong connection. She wasn't only my loving wife and the mother of our children, but also my closest friend from my college days. She understood me like no one else, which is why her betrayal shook me to my core. Just last week, we attended our college's alumni meeting, an annual event dedicated to our graduation 35 years ago. It's a big event with famous singers and celebrities performing, eagerly anticipated by all alumni. This year, our group had the chance to reunite and see how our classmates had changed. Lucy and I were particularly excited because we were one of the few couples who found love in college and stayed together all these years. When we walked into the event, we were bursting with pride, ready to showcase our strong relationship. Little did I know that this excitement would lead me down the wrong path. We relished reuniting with our dear friends after many years apart. The atmosphere was lively and filled with laughter. We were savoring what felt like the height of happiness. But our joy was interrupted by the arrival of a familiar face. Let's call him Rick, a classmate who had always deeply admired Lucy. During her college years, Lucy attracted the attention of many with her intelligence and charm, and I wasn't the only one taken with her. However, Rick stood out because his pursuit of her was marked by a sincerity that went beyond simple flirting. Despite Lucy's lack of interest, Rick was determined to win her over and wasn't willing to give up. He persistently pursued her throughout his college years. Even after learning about our relationship and her love for me, I remained a confident partner, paying no heed to his advances because I knew our bond was strong. Rick and everyone else were well aware that Lucy was exceptional, but he continued to pursue her. I distinctly remember the moment when Rick found out that Lucy had chosen to marry me. One day, he approached me with a text message claiming that Lucy had made a serious mistake, expecting me to take care of her as deeply as he thought I could. Lucy and I found his immaturity and idealism amusing and just laughed it off. After that incident, we no longer crossed paths with Rick and heard nothing about him, assuming he had finally moved on. After all, 35 years had passed since college, and we had been married for 26 years. But to our surprise, on the day of the reunion, Rick approached us again, fixated on the chapter of his life connected to Lucy. When he warmly embraced each of us, we reciprocated, but Lucy preferred a more reserved approach and chose to shake hands as Rick's gaze unsettled her. Rick took a seat across from Lucy, and his unusual intense gaze attracted everyone's attention in the room. Unable to bear the tension, I asked if he had brought his family to the reunion, hoping to change the subject. To my surprise, he told me that, at 40, he had been briefly married but was currently single. Rick admitted that his marriage had ended in divorce, and I expressed my sympathy. Unexpectedly, there was a bitter tone in his response. "Well, you should be sorry. After all, you stole my love." This ridiculous statement was accompanied by hysterical laughter. In my younger days, such provocations might have led to a physical confrontation, but now, as we approach 60, such trivial matters don't hold much weight. Rick's lack of intimidation allowed him to brush off his comments. Rick was the type of guy who wouldn't be chosen for a sports team, a brash talker whose jokes fell flat. Although everyone heard his insensitive remark, no one reacted, and a tangible discomfort settled in the air. Trying to defuse the situation, we collectively decided to ignore him. While it was clear that Lucy was particularly affected by his words, her silence spoke volumes. Nancy and I, our close college friend, recognized that Lucy was upset and took her aside. We tried to lift her spirits by advising her not to pay attention to the behavior of someone so obsessed and to enjoy the rest of the evening in peace. Understanding Lucy's tendency to overthink, we comforted her. Wanting to bring back her smile, we tried to help Lucy recover and calm down. Unexpectedly, Rick approached us, apparently eavesdropping on our conversation. To our surprise, he apologized, saying he didn't want to upset Lucy. On the contrary, he wanted to remind her that she still had an admirer, despite the passage of time and its impact on her appearance. I was outraged by his rude words, but managed to stay composed, firmly telling him to leave us alone. Rick was genuinely sorry for the trouble, and Lucy firmly asked him to give us some space. But Rick continued to stand his ground, urging Lucy to forgive him so we could enjoy the remaining moments of our final gathering. His words touched my heart, making me realize it was time to let go of the past and move forward. This evening marked the end of our meetings with old friends and classmates, highlighting the pointlessness of dwelling on the past. Realizing this, Lucy embraced Rick, urging him to let go of their story and not return to her in the future. Holding each other, we headed to the dance floor to enjoy the celebration. As others joined us, the atmosphere became more festive and enjoyable. After a while, I noticed that Nancy and Lucy were in conversation, and Rick was standing nearby. He seemed to be talking animatedly and even dancing in a somewhat silly manner. Despite this, I was relieved that the earlier conflict had been resolved, allowing us to reflect on our shared history in a positive light. Throughout the evening, I kept a close watch on Lucy to see how she was feeling. I couldn't help but notice that Rick was whispering something to her, but I hoped it was nothing to worry about. Lucy responded to Rick with a smile and a nod, which eased my concerns. I figured their conversation was probably harmless, because Lucy would have scolded him if it was inappropriate. Feeling more confident, I relaxed and enjoyed socializing with our friends and classmates. However, after about an hour, I realized that Lucy and Nancy were missing. At first, I didn't pay much attention because we were all catching up individually. But as time passed and they didn't return, I started to get worried. I actively began looking for them, growing increasingly concerned. I tried calling them, but they didn't answer, likely due to the loud music at the event. After waiting for about 30 minutes, Lucy finally showed up, but something seemed off. While her appearance remained the same, her behavior had inexplicably changed. She appeared like a completely different person, notably quiet and reserved, and she kept urging me to leave the event. Nancy joined us, but for the rest of the evening, they didn't exchange a word, maintaining an awkward silence. Seeing that Lucy and Nancy avoided eye contact, I couldn't help but think they had a disagreement. I kept trying to get Lucy to explain why she seemed upset and wanted to leave early, but she stayed silent. Despite my desire to stay until the end of the party, Lucy's insistence on leaving forced us to cut the evening short. During the long journey home, Lucy stayed silent, and I grew increasingly concerned about her well-being. I asked her repeatedly about her condition, but she just said she was tired and needed rest. I was anxious because Lucy, who's usually full of energy, seemed upset for no apparent reason. Not knowing the cause of her distress, I was very worried. Hoping to understand what was going on, I mustered the courage to ask if Nancy was involved, but Lucy curtly replied with a no, without offering any further explanation. Realizing that she needed privacy, I decided to give her space and went about my business. Once we got home, while many of our former classmates happily shared photos and chatted on social media about the reunion, I couldn't shake a feeling of sadness. Knowing that this might be our last reunion, Lucy quietly got into bed and closed her eyes, as if she wanted to give the impression that she was already asleep. Exhausted, I finally got into bed around 2 o'clock in the morning and immediately fell asleep. I hadn't been asleep for long when Lucy woke me up, sobbing. Tears streamed down her face, and she sought comfort. I held her close, gently stroking her back, and asked if seeing old friends at the reunion had caused her emotional distress. She remained silent, continuing to cry. Understanding that words weren't enough, I held her tightly to show my support and understanding. Even though she didn't want to share her feelings, I allowed her to express her emotions, comforting her with my presence as she dealt with her worries. When her tears finally stopped, she confessed something that left me in shock. She admitted that she had cheated on me Not just with anyone, but with Rick. I was speechless, unable to say anything. I was paralyzed, trying to process these revelations. Images and thoughts from the previous evening flooded my mind. The last time I saw Lucy, she was dancing with Rick and Nancy, forming an unexpected trio with them. When she returned from the party with a grim expression, insisting on leaving immediately, it became clear that Nancy was aware of what had happened, which explained her upset behavior. Feeling helpless and unable to speak, I froze in place. Sensing my inner turmoil, Lucy finally decided to reveal the truth. She said that while they were dancing, Rick began apologizing for putting her in an awkward situation, especially after she had rejected his advances multiple times. He then showered her with compliments, admiring her strength. In the midst of the dance, Rick confessed that despite traveling the world, he had never met anyone as extraordinary as Lucy. She admitted that his sincerity charmed her, and she enjoyed the compliments. Lucy, captivated, listened as he invited her for a walk, promising that it would be their last meeting. He insisted that she deserved to hear all his thoughts about her in their purest form. Initially, Lucy declined, but he continued to press, emphasizing that it was a chance to share his true feelings. Her curiosity got the best of her, and she decided to join him. Wanting to know what he had to say, Lucy went for a walk with Rick on the serene college campus, seeking peace and quiet. During their walk, Rick shared his long-standing love for her and confessed that he considered her the most extraordinary woman in the world. Their conversation revolved around different stories, but the core of it remained unchanged. Lucy admitted that she had been influenced by alcohol and had foolishly given in to his persuasive words. During their walk, Rick gently held her hands, which complicated the situation and weighed on Lucy's heart. Tears welled up in Lucy's eyes, and she sought solace in my presence. She shared painful details, recounting every intimate moment between her and Rick. The weight of her confession hung heavily in the air, and each word cut deeper into my heart. She went into excruciating detail, including the moment when guilt suddenly halted their actions, compelling her to push him away. I felt utterly powerless, and I couldn't respond to her desperate plea. Trying to gather my thoughts, I asked Lucy for some time alone. Despite my request, she continued to cry and beg for forgiveness. In an effort to console her, I suggested she rest a bit, promising that we could discuss the issue in the morning. As she clung to me tightly, expressing her fear of losing our connection, I remained still with my eyes closed, lost in deep contemplation. My mind replayed the events, meticulously examining each detail until a particular moment stood out. I recalled Rick's unsettling, victorious smile when Lucy returned from their ill-fated meeting. At that time, I didn't grasp the significance of Rick's smile, but in hindsight I realized it was a triumph on his face, as if he had finally won Lucy over. This realization flooded me with anger and disgust, overwhelming any self-pity. Sharing a bed with Lucy at that point became unbearable. After watching her fall into a deep sleep following hours of tearful sobbing, I quietly left the bed and hastily packed my laptop, wallet, and other essentials into a backpack. The weight of my emotions was heavier than ever as I made the painful decision to leave our home. Despite everything, I couldn't deny the truth. I still loved her. After 26 years of marriage, I couldn't fathom life without her. Our marriage had given us a wonderful family, filled with love and cherished memories. But despite our strong bond, I knew I couldn't stay. Lucy knew me too well, and her persuasiveness would likely have deterred me from leaving if I stayed until morning. I sought refuge in a hotel and took the necessary steps to block her room and remove her from all social networks. Exhaustion overcame me as the sun rose, and I fell into a deep sleep. By 8 o'clock in the morning, my phone rang incessantly with calls from our children, who had no knowledge of the events between their parents. Lucy and I have 2 children, a 24-year-old son and a 21-year-old daughter, both currently attending college on the same campus. Reflecting on that fateful night, I now understand that my impulsive decision to leave Lucy had to be carefully planned. Pretending everything was normal after her betrayal was impossible. She was my best friend and the core of my soulmate. Trying to act or deceive her would be futile since she knew me better than anyone else. The idea of Lucy's betrayal had never crossed my mind, so I hadn't prepared a plan for how to handle such a situation. When the children began calling me, I was caught off guard, not knowing how to respond to the truth that shattered our family. Realizing I needed to speak to at least one of my children before taking further action, I turned to my son, who typically approaches situations more calmly and maturely. With a heavy heart, I informed him that his mother had cheated on me the previous night with someone from her past, an old lover, admirer, or maybe even a stalker. I explained that I needed time to sort things out and get my bearings. This revelation shocked him to the core. The idea that his own mother could act this way was incomprehensible. This made the situation even more painful. Our family had been known for its strength and love, and we had always been proud of our close bond. Our children, relatives, and friends admired our relationship. Now all of that had been shattered due to Lucy's actions. My son couldn't come to terms with the fact that his mother was capable of such behavior and kept insisting that there must be some misunderstanding between us. Desperate for answers, he kept pressing me for details, trying to understand how and why her betrayal had occurred. Recognizing the emotional toll this was taking on my son, I understood that providing a detailed chronological account would only intensify his pain and possibly hinder his ability to move on. With a heavy heart, I acknowledged the gravity of the situation and expressed my sincere hope that it was all an elaborate joke. Sadly, I had to tell him that his mother had indeed confessed to her infidelity. Although he was 24 years old and had experienced heartbreak before, this betrayal hit him hard. Seeking understanding and trust, I asked him to promise to keep this information confidential until I was ready to share it with others. To defuse the situation and avoid further questions and concerns, I informed my daughter that I would be away on a business trip for a while due to work-related stress. As a result, the calls from our children stopped. The situation was as follows. While my daughter believed I had left for work, my son and Lucy knew we were separated. In the following days, I dived into online research, seeking top lawyers and solutions to our situation. During this time, I stumbled upon a subreddit where men shared their experiences dealing with issues similar to mine. As I delved into these online discussions, I found stories of people planning revenge on their unfaithful partners. Though I understood their anger, I couldn't fathom seeking revenge on Lucy. Deep down, my love for her remained unchanged. To deny that would be dishonest. But despite this love, I knew we could never be together again. Trust had been shattered beyond repair, and reconciliation seemed impossible. It was painful, but our paths had irreversibly diverged. As I contemplated how to handle this challenging situation, I wasn't sure if I could overcome it. There were numerous matters demanding my attention: work, the well-being of our children, property issues, and more. Tomorrow, I have a crucial meeting with a lawyer who will guide me through the legal aspects. Lucy and I are both management consultants, but in our early 40s, we left our stable jobs. Lucy pursued her passion for writing, while I became a business consultant, primarily working with startups. As a self-employed consultant, I don't have a fixed workplace. This has led me to consider the possibility of Lucy showing up at my workplace. After careful thought, I realized that given my working situation, it might not be easy for Lucy to locate me. Although I occasionally work from home, I also visit clients' offices. Working with multiple clients simultaneously makes it challenging to maintain complete anonymity. Nonetheless, Lucy hasn't managed to track me down. Approaching our 60s made us contemplate retirement. We'd put a lot of effort into planning our future, including saving to buy a beachfront home in the countryside. We aimed to make this purchase next year and had already identified potential properties that matched our desire for a peaceful retirement. Fortunately, we hadn't finalized the purchase of the beach house, and we were still negotiating with property owners. In hindsight, I'm incredibly thankful for this. If we had already bought the property, the situation would have been much more complicated. Just the thought is daunting. Meanwhile, Lucy has been persistent in trying to contact me since I decided to keep my distance. I consulted with a lawyer who advised me to inform our adult children about our separation. He also raised questions about property division, leading me to initially consider splitting it equally between Lucy and me. But upon reflection, I realized I needed to rethink my stance. Instead of seeking revenge by denying Lucy her share of our property, I decided to do the opposite. I believed she deserved her rightful half, as she had contributed as much as I had. However, I acknowledged that she also deserved the separation she sought. Having known Lucy for so long, I understood she'd be willing to give up her part of the property to reconcile and save our family. While the divorce papers were being prepared, I arranged a meeting with our children. I asked my son to discreetly bring my sister to a restaurant without revealing my presence. To my surprise, my daughter's reaction was intense when she saw me. She bombarded me with questions, including whether I had cheated on her mother after disappearing from her life. Seeing her in such distress, my heart sank. But I knew I had to stay calm for the sake of the children and the upcoming revelations. Gradually, I managed to reassure her that I hadn't been involved with anyone else. Then, with caution, I began revealing the truth in pieces. It was clear that my son already knew some of it, but my daughter was hearing the full story for the first time. Neither of them was prepared for what I had to say. My daughter's world crumbled when she learned her mother had cheated on me. For the past 15 days, since I left our home, she had been staying with Lucy. Overwhelmed with emotion, she embraced me tightly and tearfully asked for forgiveness for any ill feelings she had harbored against me. In a vulnerable moment, my children pleaded with me to consider giving our marriage another chance, but I remained firm in my decision to file for divorce. It was incredibly hard to see them cry, but they understood the depth of my pain and the importance of looking out for their own well-being. During this tough time, my children made a sincere commitment to stand by my side. I assured them that the decision to separate was made by me and their mother alone and wouldn't affect our love and support for them. My daughter expressed concern for Lucy's well-being, explaining that she was struggling with eating and sleeping. She mentioned that Lucy had gone from crying spells to restlessness and had been calling me continuously, deeply saddened by my absence and searching for me in my clients' offices. But every client informed her that I hadn't shown up at their offices for the past 2 weeks. Sensing her mother's anxiety, my daughter bravely asked Lucy if something had happened between us that she needed to know about. Lucy responded with silence to her daughter's question, and tears continued to flow incessantly. Unable to calm down, my daughter went to her room, isolating herself and succumbing to waves of sadness. Recognizing the emotional blow this had dealt to our children, I asked my daughter to stay home and support her mother during the divorce process. As we discussed Lucy's actions, I felt our children changing. Their initial sadness gradually gave way to anger, as they also felt betrayed by their mother's actions. They clearly bear the weight of the experiences and pain caused by the breakdown of our family. In this situation, we're all victims, but the blame for the destruction of our once strong family lies on one side. Despite the pain and betrayal caused by Lucy's actions, I'm determined not to let our children harbor hatred for their mother. On the contrary, I urge them to provide support during this difficult time. What happened next, however, was truly astonishing. A few days later, I received a message from Rick inquiring about Lucy's well-being. He brazenly stated that if I intended to divorce her because of her infidelity, then he was ready to intervene and take her for himself. In response, I made it clear that Lucy is a free woman who has the right to make her own choices. After our correspondence, I promptly blocked him, excluding any further contact with him from my life. Oddly enough, Rick's message didn't provoke much anger in me. I didn't want to be manipulated by this intruder. After all, I was never married to him, didn't love him, and didn't trust him. My deep connections were exclusively with Lucy, which is why her betrayal caused me such profound pain. It's not so much the feeling of insecurity that concerns me, but the emotional aftermath of her actions. If she wants to continue her relationship with Rick, it doesn't bother me. Since the divorce papers are set to be delivered today, I eagerly await my daughter's call to learn how Lucy reacted to this development. Meanwhile, I need to address a multitude of crucial issues, including property division, retirement planning, and ensuring the safety and well-being of my children. These tasks demand careful consideration and resolution as I work to establish a solid foundation for the future. Time has passed, and it was a challenging and stressful period as I worked to resolve various issues. I'm pleased to report that my divorce is now officially settled, but when Lucy received the divorce papers, her illusions about my temporary anger came crashing down. The reality of the situation hit her hard, and she struggled to come to terms with it. She had been living in a bubble, believing that my anger would eventually subside and we would reconcile. However, once she received the documents, this fragile bubble burst, revealing the truth about our separation. She persistently requested a meeting with me before signing the divorce papers, convinced she could persuade me against it. She was right, and if I had agreed to meet her, her persuasive words and magnetic presence might have swayed me. Nonetheless, I decided to stand by my decision, prioritizing my emotional well-being. Conflicting emotions overwhelmed me. Despite still loving Lucy deeply and finding it painful to witness her deteriorating condition, I couldn't ignore the damage to our family and neglect my self-respect. I realized she had taken me for granted, destroying the foundation of our once strong love. As much as I wanted to save her from becoming a shell of her former self, I knew I couldn't continue living in such a toxic environment. My daughter contacted me, expressing concern about Lucy's fragile state and informing me that Lucy had been hospitalized due to depression. Additionally, the financial burden caused by her actions fell on her shoulders, further reinforcing my confidence that despite the difficulty of watching her suffer, I had made the right decision for myself and our family's well-being. Lucy's refusal to take any medication or supplements to maintain her health worsened her condition, necessitating a switch to a liquid diet. Some might view my actions and apparent indifference to her deteriorating health as those of a ruthless and selfish person. They may question whether I truly loved Lucy. To such conclusions, I respond as follows. Without experiencing the profound pain of betrayal, it's challenging to fully grasp the depth of my suffering and the complexity of my emotions. Describing my love for Lucy as mere adoration would be an understatement. I cherished her, worshipped the ground she walked on, and was her biggest fan and soulmate. Nearly 3 decades together, she wasn't just the love of my life, but also the mother of our children. Rick, in his own way, was right. Finding a woman like Lucy is exceedingly rare, distinguished by intelligence, talent, empathy, and all the qualities one could desire in a partner. I tried to care for her and treat her as such, but her actions toward me showed no reciprocation of love and trust. The deep connections were exclusively with Lucy, which is why her betrayal caused me profound pain. It's not so much the feeling of insecurity that troubles me, but the emotional aftermath of her actions. If she wishes to continue her relationship with Rick, it doesn't concern me. As the divorce papers are set to be delivered today, I eagerly await my daughter's call to learn how Lucy reacted to this development. Meanwhile, I must address various critical issues, including property division, retirement planning, and the well-being of my children. These tasks require careful consideration and resolution as I work to build a solid foundation for the future. Surprisingly, Nancy didn't act surprised at all. She claimed to already know why we had separated. Curious, she started calling me to learn the details of how I discovered Lucy's infidelity. I informed Nancy that Lucy had admitted to being unfaithful. Nancy apologized and mentioned that she had previously warned Lucy about Rick and advised her not to spend time alone with him. Regrettably, Lucy chose to disregard Nancy's advice. But Nancy also shared a version of the story that differed from what Lucy had told me. According to Nancy, she and Lucy were happily dancing when Rick joined them and made advances on Lucy. He kept whispering in her ear, which made me doubt Lucy's explanation that it was an apology. Nancy's account painted a different picture, casting suspicion on Rick's intentions and Lucy's involvement. Nancy expressed her dissatisfaction with Rick's advances and tried to intervene, noticing significant changes in Lucy's behavior. To Nancy's surprise, she discovered that Lucy enjoyed talking to Rick, which deeply concerned her. This complicated the situation further, raising questions about Lucy's feelings for Rick. When Rick suggested going for a walk, Lucy asked Nancy for advice, silently wondering what to do. Nancy strongly opposed the idea, emphasizing Rick's dangerous reputation. However, Lucy eventually agreed to the walk, despite Nancy's reservations. Nancy was engrossed in conversation with friends and didn't immediately notice Lucy's absence. Gradually, she realized this and became worried. She searched for Lucy and found her with Rick in an unexpected place, the college pool locker room. This contradicted Lucy's claim that they were on the lawn. Nancy confronted them, interrupting their encounter and revealing that it was her presence, not Lucy's conscience, that stopped them. Despite the painful betrayal, I couldn't help but feel proud of Lucy for admitting her mistakes to me. Knowing the truth brought some comfort, but the betrayal still weighed on my heart. I initially believed her blame on intoxication, but I later realized it was a conscious choice. The fact that their encounter took place far from our original location at the college pool emphasized that it was deliberate, not a momentary weakness. It was clear that Lucy's actions were intentional. After listening to Nancy, I asked the pressing question, could I consider giving Lucy another chance? I was torn. Lucy had confessed, but Nancy's revelation of the differing versions added complexity. Lucy's deception left me in emotional shock. Meanwhile, my children shared concerning news about Lucy's deteriorating mental state. She fell into deep depression and was on the brink of self-harm. Learning of her condition, I turned to Nancy for support and advice. I explained the previous phone conversation to Nancy, where Lucy told me a different story. I asked Nancy to visit Lucy and have an honest conversation. It was evident that Lucy held a painful secret. I urged Nancy to inform Lucy that I now knew the whole truth and had decided not to forgive or rebuild our relationship. I suspected that Lucy was intentionally harming herself, so her well-being became my top concern. Lucy hoped for reconciliation, but Nancy visited as I requested and updated me. Lucy was on the path to recovery from her emotional struggles, and she had signed the divorce papers, which brought some relief. In light of recent events, I found motivation to wrap up my work commitments. Instead of settling down as planned, I felt compelled to choose a different path. I decided to embark on a solo journey, seeking new experiences and freeing myself from obligations. The prospect of escaping the restrictions of a permanent residence brought me joy and promised an improved mental state. I acknowledge that I may not be handling the situation perfectly, but I'm doing my best in these unpredictable times. I can only hope for the best in overcoming this challenging period. A year has gone by, and I want to update you on some developments. During this time, it felt like time passed slowly for me. After leaving our house, I stayed in a hotel for a few months, and then rented an apartment while our divorce proceeded as planned. I continued to work, but I switched to clients that allowed me to work from home full-time. This change offered more flexibility and helped me adapt to my new life. Concerning our property division, Lucy received 50% of the money we had saved for our retirement home. Though it was tough to part with that money, I understood the importance of a fair split during our divorce. To ensure a fair distribution of the remaining 50%, which is rightfully mine, I decided to share it between my two children. They are old enough and independent, so having access to these funds can be useful for them. As for Lucy, she's still undergoing therapy to deal with her emotional issues. Nancy stays in touch with her and occasionally asks about my well-being. During a conversation with Nancy, she shared unexpected information about Lucy. It's crucial to handle this info cautiously, as Nancy still supports Lucy. Nevertheless, I'm willing to hear her perspective. It turns out that, despite what I thought, there are reasons to be skeptical about how well I know Lucy. I held Lucy in high regard, considering her strong and determined, but it appears that loneliness may have influenced her decisions. According to what I learned, Lucy began communicating with Rick, and he reciprocated her feelings. Their relationship appeared to be flourishing until he found out about our impending divorce. Once Rick learned about the divorce, his behavior took an unexpected turn. He distanced himself from Lucy, leaving her confused and heartbroken. Despite her efforts to remind him of his previous expressions of love, he claimed his intentions were only for a casual encounter. He admitted he didn't want a long-term emotional relationship or marriage due to her strong-willed nature. This revelation left Lucy feeling betrayed and shattered her image of Rick's intentions. Their relationship seemed built on fleeting desires and empty promises, rather than genuine affection and commitment. It's difficult to fathom that Lucy begged Rick for a relationship, especially given his reputation for insincerity. Rick's true intentions were exposed when he revealed his desire for only a physical relationship, disregarding Lucy's need for emotional support. He also mentioned having a roommate with whom he was content. All his apparent love and admiration turned out to be a facade, which left Lucy feeling deceived and insulted. In a cruel final statement, Rick arrogantly claimed to have achieved his goals, even boasting about outsmarting Lucy. This revelation deeply unsettled Lucy, making her realize she had fallen for his lies and manipulations. A couple of weeks ago, I received an update on Lucy. My daughter had been living with her to provide companionship and support during her battle with depression since I left our home. However, after a year, my daughter reached her limit. Lucy's behavioral changes had become unbearable. Once emotionally strong, Lucy had transformed into a person filled with self-doubt and a constant need for attention. She had become unpredictable and unstable, displaying hysterical tendencies that strained others. Despite my daughter's best efforts, living with Lucy had become impossible. This was a stark contrast to the Lucy we once knew, highlighting the devastating impact of her actions and emotional experiences on her well-being. Lucy's mental state deteriorated, leading to delirium and confusion. She had turned into a controlling and possessive mother, frequently bombarding my children with phone calls if they didn't answer immediately. Whenever my daughter tried to address Lucy's stubborn behavior, Lucy became distressed and expressed her fear of losing them. She had been deeply terrified by my departure, and my children assured her that they wouldn't abandon her. They did everything in their power to help her with her depression, but if her controlling tendencies persisted, they might need to reconsider their stance. Lucy often engaged in intense arguments with her children, accusing them of not supporting her during the most challenging moments of her life. This behavior was unfamiliar to us. The children were shocked by Lucy's unusual conduct. Ultimately, they had a heated argument with her, making it clear that her actions had disrupted everyone's lives. Our once caring, reliable, and joyful family had become fragmented and distorted. It was hard for Lucy to accept that her own children held her responsible for these events. 2 weeks ago, my daughter decided to leave home. She informed me that she had done everything possible to help Lucy, but couldn't put her own life on hold to care for her. I believe my daughter's decision was reasonable. It's crucial for her to move forward, just as it's essential for Lucy to take responsibility for her life. While it's natural for someone my age to find some satisfaction in seeing his unfaithful ex-wife suffer, I must admit that I felt no joy in this situation. Instead, I felt deep sadness for Lucy and her current state. Her poor decisions have led to a lifetime of suffering, and I genuinely hope she can recover her former self. Regaining confidence and strength. Over the past year, I've traveled to 4 different countries. It has been an incredible journey, experiencing diverse cultures, savoring local cuisines, and embracing entirely new ways of life. Initially, I was disappointed to deviate from my retirement plan, which involved being with Lucy. However, I've come to appreciate the opportunity to immerse myself in various cultures and lifestyles. During my travels, I had the pleasure of meeting incredible people from various cities worldwide. Currently, I'm not involved in any romantic relationship, nor am I actively seeking one. I'm open to whatever the future might bring. To be honest, the last 2.5 years haven't seen any major events, except for my extensive travels to over a dozen countries and rekindling my passion for painting. In the past month, I had the opportunity to reunite with Lucy after a 4-year gap. The reason for this unexpected encounter was my son's upcoming wedding. He found his life partner, and 2 months before the wedding, he wished for Lucy and me to meet the girl's parents. At first, I was hesitant, suggesting we meet at the wedding, but I eventually agreed to accompany Lucy to this significant event. I realized it wasn't about me, but my duty as a father. A week before the wedding, the girl's parents graciously hosted a dinner for us, although I had doubts initially. However, I decided to attend at the last moment. It was emotionally challenging to see Lucy there. I would have preferred it to be just the 2 of us. But I knew I had to be there for my son, and both he and his fiancée were thrilled to see me. Her parents left a wonderful impression as kind and hospitable people. When I met the girl's father, it felt like we immediately clicked. We had a great conversation about his business, but I won't dwell on those details because I assume you're more interested in the situation with Lucy. So, let's get to the point. When I entered the room, I noticed Lucy appeared visibly uneasy. Something had changed in her, a transformation in her eyes. She was no longer the woman I once knew, although she smiled politely. There was tension in her. It was evident that she had distanced herself from me over time. Despite the years that had passed, Lucy still had her characteristic long hair, a consistent feature of her character. but I couldn't help but notice that these 4 years seemed to have taken a toll on her more than I expected. As we sat at the table, it turned out that my son hadn't disclosed the nature of our past relationship to the girl's parents. This would be the first meeting for both sets of parents. While this detail interested me, I didn't anticipate any issues arising from it. Initially, Lucy was quiet in the company of others, but when she found a moment to speak to me alone, she commented on my appearance, noting that I looked healthier and more energetic. I agreed and mentioned that I had intentionally removed all toxic elements from my life. This confession momentarily surprised her, and she discreetly looked around to ensure no one overheard our conversation. She curiously inquired about my current romantic status, but I deftly evaded the question, firmly stating that it shouldn't concern her. Throughout our conversation, I tried not to focus on her, but engaged with the other guests. When the evening drew to a close, and it was time to bid farewell, I warmly embraced everyone present. As we were about to leave, I simply nodded to Lucy and casually told her to take care of herself. This took her by surprise, and she abruptly stood up as I said my goodbyes to others. Although things happened quickly, I believe the exchange didn't appear too awkward to the others. Surprisingly, the meeting with Lucy turned out to be quite straightforward. From her behavior, it seemed she was either startled by my presence or felt too uncomfortable for a more open conversation. Regardless of her thoughts, I found it uninteresting to delve further into this matter and departed from the gathering. As I was about to leave, my son walked me outside and kindly invited me to spend the next few days with him. Unfortunately, I declined his generous offer, but promised to call him soon. With those words, I headed to my hotel. It's important to note that I no longer have a fixed place of residence. I frequently travel, and when I return, I usually stay in hotels. Transitioning to a nomadic lifestyle wasn't easy after 26 years as a devoted family man. However, over time, I grew accustomed to this adventurous way of life and have come to fully enjoy the freedom it brings. I'd like to share more news with you. I now have a life partner. 2 years ago, during a trip to Tokyo, I met Ashlyn, a 52-year-old woman who had recently left an abusive relationship and embarked on her first solo journey. Our paths crossed while climbing a mountain, and we formed a genuine connection. At that time, neither of us sought a romantic relationship, so we developed a deep friendship. After my stay in Tokyo, I was planning to go to South Korea, and she intended to explore Thailand. Surprisingly, we continued to communicate over the next few months, nurturing our friendship. Recognizing our compatibility, we mutually decided to plan our future adventures together. Over the past year and a half, we've embarked on various journeys, exploring more than 8 countries. We've become travel companions, prioritizing the bond that connects us over rushing into a romantic relationship. In fact, for the first 2 months of traveling together, we maintained a platonic relationship by mutual consent. We weren't in a hurry to know each other deeply, focusing on enjoying our discoveries and explorations while continuing to travel. My children were aware of Aislyn's presence in my life, but chose not to inform Lucy about it, fearing it might trigger her depression. Upon arriving at the hotel, I phoned my son to explain why I declined his offer to stay with him. I told him that Aislyn had joined me on this trip, and it wouldn't be fair to leave her alone. Additionally, I expressed my desire for Aislyn to attend the wedding as my partner. Although my son liked the idea, he also expressed concern about Lucy's potential reaction. Nevertheless, I stood my ground, emphasizing the importance of Aislyn attending the wedding and getting to know my family. I suggested my son involve my daughter in the conversation to discuss the matter collectively. Thankfully, my daughter supported my decision and agreed that Aislyn should meet our family. With just a week left before the wedding, we spent our time exploring the city together, giving Aislyn an unforgettable tour of Kentucky since it was her first visit. Finally, the wedding day arrived. As we entered the venue, I couldn't help but notice Lucy's fixed gaze on me. Lucy's reaction was intense when she spotted Aislyn and me walking hand in hand to the wedding venue. Before the event, I had cautioned Aislyn about the possibility of Lucy's unwanted behavior, but she assured me that she could handle it calmly. It was at that moment that I became personally aware of how much control Lucy still had over me. Following our separation, Lucy rushed toward us, swiftly grabbing my wrist, attempting to pull me aside. I firmly stated I didn't want to engage in a personal conversation with her. Lucy posed direct questions, inquiring if Aislinn was my girlfriend and if I intended to marry her. I firmly replied that it was none of her business. With growing attention from other guests who noticed Lucy's tears and anger, I asked her to leave us alone. The wedding was about to begin, and her actions were disturbing the joyful atmosphere. My daughter tried to mediate and calm her mother, but Lucy stubbornly resisted. We implored her, stressing that her actions were spoiling the wedding for everyone. Lucy raised her voice, displaying her indifference to the situation. In response, my typically soft-spoken daughter intervened and became resolute. Not only did she maintain her composure, but she continued to give Lucy a stern and memorable lesson. I was taken aback by our daughter's unexpected outburst. With strong yet controlled anger, she conveyed a harsh truth that had been buried for too long. She reminded Lucy that they were supposed to enter the wedding hall together as a family. Instead, Lucy's involvement with someone else was seen as an act of betrayal. My daughter presented Lucy with two options: accept the situation and move on, or my daughter would ensure her removal from the wedding before it started. The gravity of her words left no room for negotiation or further disruption. As a father, I initially stepped in to protect my daughter. However, I soon realized her resilience and strength, even in the face of her own mother's actions. With unwavering determination, my daughter pointed directly at Lucy, ensuring her words carried weight. By the way Lucy was squeezing my wrist, I could sense the tension building, and then she released her grip. We made eye contact, and her face trembled, conveying a mix of anger and betrayal. After a few moments of silence, Lucy turned and left without acknowledging Aislinn. To my surprise and relief, my daughter took the initiative to apologize to Aislinn on Lucy's behalf. Aislinn warmly embraced both of us, and I expressed my pride in my daughter's strength and resilience, referring to her as my soldier. She was visibly emotional when I used that term. Lucy had caused suffering to those around her, but she had always expected sympathy and care from certain friends over the years. Due to circumstances, my children didn't have a family home for special occasions, and I acknowledged my role in this outcome. Throughout the remainder of the wedding, Lucy grew increasingly irritated by our children's support for me. She distanced herself, often standing alone in corners or sitting by herself, appearing more distant than a groom's mother should be at such an event. She even chose not to participate in the family photo, further highlighting her sense of isolation. A few days ago, Nancy gave me a call. She mentioned that Lucy was upset that I was moving on with my life while she remained lonely. In response, I told Nancy that my children and I had reached a point where we couldn't bear Lucy's constant dramas any longer. I explained that Lucy was on her own path, and she was free to live as she pleased. My primary goal now is to enjoy the remaining years of my life in peace. I'm considering the idea of being closer to my children and taking responsibility for their family gatherings, even though they are grown. I believe it would provide them with a comfortable and stable environment where they can come together when needed. The recent wedding made me realize that a new phase of life is approaching, where I may become a grandparent. I don't feel the need to inform Lucy about this, and I'm content with that decision. When the time comes, I'll see if Aislinn wants to join me on this journey. Nancy also informed me that Lucy is in a bad condition, behaving inappropriately and experiencing panic attacks. I asked Nancy to stay with Lucy, offer her support, and promise to reach out to my daughter to help. Since my daughter was away, Nancy couldn't stay with Lucy for an extended period, and she was left alone in the house in such a terrible state. Before the next day arrived, my children and I received devastating news. In a state of mental breakdown, Lucy ran onto the road and was struck by a motorcyclist who couldn't react in time to avoid the collision. Lucy, the love of my life and the mother of my children, passed away instantly. It's really difficult for me to talk about it. Her body was terribly injured, resembling a disassembled doll. While I might blame myself for insisting on bringing my new partner to my son's wedding, we couldn't have continued to endure Lucy's manipulations for the rest of our lives. It all began with her betrayal, and no one is at fault for the path she chose.
Songs have a way of tying themselves to memories. I swear I'll never hear "Long Cool Woman in a Black Dress" without thinking of that rocking chair. It was a Maloof, handcrafted by Sam Malouf before he passed away, and cost my father 20 grand over 20 years ago. It's not just any rocking chair, it's a stunning work of art in Claro walnut, expertly sculpted and incredibly comfortable. Despite my father's flaws, it was the only thing of value he left me, and I still appreciate it. So, I came home to my Brentwood mansion and heard music blasting. The song started with echoing guitar arpeggios leading into a powerful arrangement. It wasn't my usual taste, but it was impressive. I followed the music into the family room, tossing my jacket aside, eager to relax in my chair with a beer and maybe some time with Tara. She'd been cranky lately, and it had been nearly 2 weeks since we last had a moment together. I walked into the family room and stopped dead. Tara was in the Malouf rocking chair without clothes, and in the middle of the act with my bandmate Carl. Both were using my favorite chair and my ex-wife, and I wasn't sure which upset me more. My mind raced. Why is she with him? Holy cow, they're going at it to the beat of the song. Thank God it's not rap, or Carl might have hurt his back. Carl was using the chair's design to his advantage for leverage. Then I wondered if Sam Malouf ever imagined his chairs being used this way. If they broke that chair, I'd lose it. I stood there for about a minute and a half until Carl noticed me and tried to disentangle himself from Tara and the chair. I was frozen, unsure of what to do. Confronting them would just make things worse and draw unwanted media attention, not to mention risk my hands and the band's future. So I did nothing. I turned and walked away, heading toward the bedroom. As I buttoned a new shirt, I caught Tara's reflection in the mirror. "Where are you going?" Tara asked, avoiding eye contact. I tried to smile but failed, just staring at her. Tara, once a teen idol, now a glamorous star, was my wife, and now, apparently, neither. "We didn't mean for it to happen," she said, sitting on the bed while I packed a duffel bag with clothes. Once I had enough, I dragged the bag to my dresser and added underwear and socks. "That's it?" Tara asked. "You're not even going to say anything?" I ignored her. Despite expecting to be furious, I just felt exhausted and defeated. It was like the wind had been knocked out of me. "God damn it, Nick! Say something!" she yelled. "What do you want me to say?" I snapped, dropping the duffel bag. "Is there a guide for finding out that your wife and one of your oldest friends are having an affair? Huh? Should I have been prepared for this? Maybe you could have dropped some hints." I was drained and just wanted to get away. I dragged my duffel bag past Tara, grabbed some toiletries from the bathroom, and packed the bag into my Escalade. Back in the house, Carl was lacing his shoes in the rocking chair. "Look, Nick," Carl began, but I cut him off. "I just want my chair," I said, picking it up. I nodded toward my Grammy Awards and framed albums. "You and Tara can box up my stuff, okay?" "Where are you going?" Carl asked. "You're the point man for the negotiations. You're not leaving, are you?" "Ship everything to my mom's house," I said, ignoring him. "I'll handle things from there." I loaded the chair into the Escalade with some guitars and started to get in. "Nick," Carl pleaded, "please let me explain." I took a deep breath. "So what is it that you didn't mean to happen? You ducking her or me catching you?" I didn't wait for a response and drove off as quickly as I could. I was 3 hours and over 250 miles west of Los Angeles, wishing Brentwood would just sink into the ocean. The driver, whose voice was rough from smoking, asked where we were headed. I told him Grant City, even though I no longer lived there. He chuckled and questioned if I was just running away, which I didn't answer. Eventually, he said people like me always pick the wrong ones. I agreed, and he called me a shallow prick. I retorted with a jab about him being just as bad. The conversation was going nowhere, but oddly, I wanted his company a bit longer. We rode in silence for 10 miles. He looked the same as always, gray hair, thick beard, big chest, and arms straining his flannel shirt. I could almost reach out, but knew it wouldn't make a difference. I faintly smelled cigarette smoke mixed with Lagerfeld cologne. After a while, he suggested I should have confronted the guy. I questioned what that would have changed, since they both knew better but acted anyway. He shrugged, saying it might have made me feel better than running away. I pointed out that confronting him would only result in swollen hands, tabloid mess, and them still being together in my chair. He reminded me he bought the chair, but I said it was mine now since he was dead. He agreed, but still said he would have kicked him. As we merged from Interstate 15 to 70, my cell rang. It was almost 11, and after 8 hours on the road, I was tired. I answered to John, our lead guitarist, shouting over nightclub noise. He said I needed to return because we were close to a major deal, and Ethan couldn't handle it alone. I told John to let Ethan handle it and turned off my phone. Leadfoot, the band from high school, had me on rhythm guitar and lead vocals, with Teddy, Carl, and Vince. In junior year, Teddy got into alternative country rock. Hearing the Jayhawks in his room hooked me instantly. We spent hours with Hollywood Town Hall, and it still reminds me of that day whenever I hear Two Angels. Teddy and I began writing songs the next day. Music was easy, but lyrics were tougher. Teddy's love for poetry and classic literature inspired us, and soon we were churning out material. Teddy focused more on music, helping with lyrics occasionally. After high school, Leadfoot won a talent contest at the Lincoln County Fair, landing us a spot at the Illinois State Fair. Despite a strong performance, we only placed second behind a tap dancing act, leading to audience boos. Ethan Rose, a talent scout, approached us after the show and set up auditions in Nashville and Memphis. By college start, we had a record deal. Teddy left the band, concerned about selling out and losing his scholarship. Ethan then searched for a new lead guitarist. During Christmas break, Carl, Vince, and I auditioned in Memphis and found John Booma, a skilled studio musician. He wasn't great with lyrics, so I took over, while Carl and Vince played and sang. Our first album, Somewhere Down Highway 66, went multi-platinum, and Plain States hit diamond platinum with over 13 million copies sold. Since then, we've relied on those successes. We're currently negotiating a 5-album deal with Columbia, who are skeptical about our long-term viability. I'm responsible for showing we have strong material, but our song collection is weak. Despite this, the band and Ethan believe we can secure the deal, though Columbia is pressing hard due to our lackluster songs. On Wednesday afternoon, after a long drive through Nebraska, I checked into a Holiday Inn in Grand Island to rest. Exhausted, I fell asleep quickly but was disturbed by a troubling dream about Tara and the band. I woke up sweating and found a call from Ethan. I told him I wouldn't be back soon and to handle things without signing anything yet. He was worried I might bail on the band, but I insisted he wait for my approval. Realizing the situation could become public, I advised him to hold off on any deals. I showered, got back on the road, and by evening was in Iowa. I was still torn about whether to leave the band and everything behind. Walter suggested that if I was too scared to confront Carl, I should let the band deal with it and not run away, reminding me I'd still have everything: my band, fame, money, and a chance for revenge on Carl. I mentioned possibly quitting anyway, but Walter dismissed it, saying I'd remember what it was like being at the top and then losing it all. I filed away his words as potential lyrics. As we drove through Iowa, Walter revealed that his departure from writing wasn't because of Trudy, but because he'd lost focus due to the celebrity life. He eventually regained his touch with his last books, but admitted that abandoning his family was part of it. He suggested that dumping Tara might be a good move, not just for refocusing, but because she's self-centered, something he warned me about before we married. That was our last conversation before he died in a rock climbing accident, and he'd said the same about Tara. After that, I slammed down the phone and didn't speak to him again before he passed away a year later. Walter argued that dumping Tara would shed excess baggage and help refocus my energies. He claimed he was the real baggage and that getting rid of his distractions, like alcohol and women, except Trudy and Susan, had helped him regain his writing skills. I knew he was telling the truth. His books after the divorce, particularly the one about a disintegrated family, reflected his self-criticism and painted me and Mom in a sympathetic light. I questioned whether getting rid of Tara would help, especially since the band wasn't exactly supportive. Walter said I should enjoy my luck and quit if I wanted to. He warned me to stay busy with something meaningful, to avoid becoming a has-been recounting past glories. I was finally in Illinois, which wasn't much better than Iowa or Nebraska, when my cell phone rang. I hesitated before answering. Tara's voice came through, asking if I was there and begging me to talk. I cut straight to the point, asking how long the affair had been going on. She dodged the question, whining that she wanted to discuss it in person rather than over the phone. I told her I didn't want to meet right now. She asked where I was and said she could come to me. I don't want you coming over, I said. I need some time to sort things out. You can't take a break now, honey. You're right in the middle of your new record deal. Carl and the guys are really concerned, she insisted. Seriously? I shouted into the phone. I catch you and Carl together and all you care about is my duties to the band? What about your responsibilities to me? Can we discuss that for a moment, Tara? Screw you, she snapped. Grow the heck up, Nick. You sleep with groupies all the time, so what's the big deal if I have a little fun on the side? It's not like you're giving me what I need. That's a bullcrap, and you know it, I said. I haven't been with a groupie since our first tour. I didn't even know you then, and I haven't been with anyone else since we got together. How many times do I need to tell you this? What about Tracy? She shot back, mentioning her younger co-star. Remember those photos in the Inquirer last year? Are you going to deny that too? I took a deep breath, trying to stay calm. We've gone over this a million times, I said. Nothing happened. We ran into each other at a club. She was drunk and some guys were bothering her. I just gave her a ride home. That's it. And I'll tell you again, she said. That's a damn lie, and you know it. She was all over you. She was falling down drunk, I said. You saw her legs giving out. Damn it, Nick, just come back here, she begged. Her tears sounded genuine, and crying on cue was her only real weakness as an actress. I'm sorry, I said. I can't handle this right now. We'll talk later, all right? Don't hang up on me, she pleaded. I ended the call anyway, turning off my cell phone after I hung up. Backstage at the We the People festival, we met up. Leadfoot was performing right before the Eagles' so-called final reunion tour, and Tara was the celebrity chosen to introduce us. That was 5 years ago, and both of us were at the peak of our careers. As a child star, Tara went from a small role in campus life to a leading part in a popular series. She evolved from a tomboy into a stunning young woman beloved by fans. Despite her wholesome on-screen image, her off-camera life was wild, often involving high-profile Hollywood figures and compromising photos. However, she stayed away from pills and rarely drank, which kept tabloids at bay. During a high-profile festival gig with Leadfoot, Tara approached me after our set. In tight jeans and a Western shirt, she flirted and invited me out. I agreed, and after a thrilling second set, we spent 3 days together in my hotel suite, then flew to Fiji for 10 more days. I fell for her when she taught me to drink beer through my nose, and we married a year later. Despite the pressures of filming, touring, and public attention, we managed better than most until recently. Returning to my mom's house after 7 years, I noticed it was just as I remembered. I called out to her, and she appeared, greeting me warmly despite her disheveled appearance. Noticing my rough state, she asked if I was interrupting anything, and I offered to stay at a motel for the night. Mom called her current partner, Dr. Bob, down from upstairs. To my surprise, he was significantly younger than her. Mom joked that his age helped him keep up with her. Dr. Bob greeted me warmly, and I apologized for the unexpected visit. He seemed genuinely pleased to see me. Mom reassured me that their relationship was over, which Dr. Bob's affectionate glance confirmed. Mom noticed I hadn't eaten properly in over 40 hours and made grilled cheese and tomato soup, my childhood favorite. While she cooked, Bob and I caught up on Grant City news. At the table, Bob asked about Tara, and I struggled to smile. Bob then suggested both Tara and I might be cheating. I admitted Tara's affair with Carl Simpson, which Mom responded to bluntly. Her straightforwardness, like Walter's, was refreshing. Bob was surprised by Mom's honesty and nearly choked on his soup. Mom criticized Carl Simpson's false charm and reckless behavior behind closed doors. Bob asked about my plans, and I said I needed to stay with Mom to relax and clear my head. Mom agreed, provided Bob was okay with it. I learned Bob had split from his previous partner, Elaine, and was now living with Mom. Mom hadn't mentioned this, and it made sense that Bob and Mom likely connected on New Year's Eve after a few drinks. Given Mom's charm and looks, it wasn't surprising Bob was into her. I laughed and asked Bob if I could stay with them. His serious look made me laugh harder, causing milk to spill through my nose. After a nap, I found a note from Mom saying she was out for the evening and Bob was at the office. Not wanting to be alone, I went to the hitching rail, where I used to work. The packed parking lot and busy dining room showed they were still serving great food. At the bar, Victoria, who was surprised to see me, gave me a big hug. She and her husband Ron owned the hitching rail for over 30 years and always treated their staff like family. Victoria mentioned it had been too long since we last met and led me to the kitchen to see Ron. Ron, busy and clean despite the kitchen mess, gave me a bear hug and commented on my appearance, laughing at my joke about California. He promised to fix me up with a proper meal. Victoria seated me at a small table and pointed out a redhead working at the waitress station. I recognized her as Amy Standish, who hadn't changed much in 10 years. The diner was filled with familiar faces, making it feel like home. "Hey, Amy," I said, surprised. Amy quickly took my drink order and then went off to attend to other tables. When she returned with a fresh beer, she swapped out the empty bottle and left again. Amy had been my high school crush, but despite my efforts, she never noticed me. She was focused and aloof, sticking to her group of brainy classmates. By the time she worked at the hitching rail, I was already a cook there. I admired her efficiency and reserved nature, though I once awkwardly tried to talk to her and got rejected. Ron later explained that Amy's shyness was due to her parents pushing her into the job to help her overcome it. Months later, a brief, "Hello, Nick," from Amy before college was a highlight for me. Now, sitting with Jimmy Schultz at the bar, I asked about Amy. Jimmy, now an insurance salesman, told me she had married a quiet engineer who left her for a male coworker. Amy is back in town, working as an English teacher and part-time at the bar. She's not seeing anyone and hasn't shown interest in dating. I went to get us another round and noticed the shortage of cocktail waitresses. I also asked Jimmy about Teddy. He still keeps in touch with Teddy, who lives on Foster Road, married to Jenny Layden with 2 daughters, and teaching English at the high school. Teddy occasionally plays in a bar band, which was ironic since he had left Leadfoot to avoid that scene. Jimmy's comment made me realize Teddy was happier living a simpler life, something he'd always preferred. Unlike me, Teddy had avoided the chaos of fame and built a fulfilling, normal life. He had it better than I did, and he also enjoyed Jenny Layden's company. As Walter and I walked home, he noticed my mood. I explained I had a lot on my mind, not just from Jimmy's comments, but also from realizing how out of touch I felt lately. I noted that my mom came from a small town, while Walter's family was from Chicago's elite. We were from different worlds, small town versus glamorous. Walter agreed, but I added that his behavior, like sleeping with starlets, only highlighted the contrast. Jimmy's comments made me see that Teddy's small-town life, which I had viewed through a Hollywood lens, actually made him happier. Despite my success and wealth, I felt empty, with a superstar wife and even my best friend feeling like a ghost. Walter had started appearing to me a year after he died, following a show in Dallas. At first, I thought it was a bad trip, but he seemed too real and our conversations too clear. After months of private conversations with him, which felt creepy, I saw Dr. Salomon. Initial doctors thought it might be pills residue, but tests showed nothing. Dr. Salomon ruled out schizophrenia and suggested I was seeing a manifestation of my past, a way my mind was dealing with stress and unresolved issues, particularly with my father. Walter then was a stand-in for that absent support. Dr. Salomon's explanation made sense. He believed seeing Walter was a healthy way to handle my pressures, and that over time I'd just have internal dialogues. I felt better until Walter reappeared, mocking Dr. Salomon's theory and revealing details about his long-lost manuscript, which was published to acclaim 8 months later. After a few beers, good conversation, and a huge bacon cheeseburger, I slept well. Friday morning, I felt refreshed and saw my old cheerful self in the mirror. Even the 23 unread voicemails didn't dampen my mood. I had yogurt and coffee, then spent almost 11 hours writing music, inspired by a story about Lennon and McCartney. Bob stopped by for lunch, but I was too focused to take a break. I filled half my notebook with new ideas. When Mom and Bob went out for fish fry, I continued working on a new melody. It wasn't perfect, but it was close. I got ready slowly and walked to the hitching rail, arriving late to a packed bar where the band was playing a catchy Ernest Tubb tune. Victoria led me to the kitchen, where Ron was preparing food and joking about California ruining me. Amy, blushing and avoiding eye contact, was asked to get me a beer. Her scent lingered as she left. Victoria and Ron watched me, and I stammered about how good Amy looked. Ron joked about me needing to grow a pair, which made me laugh. After my meal, I returned to the bar and saw Jimmy Schultz chatting with Jenny Cooper, formerly Layden, who looked much the same as at prom, but with a bit more weight and a few lines on her face. I offered to buy drinks as the song ended. Jenny hugged me tightly, excited to see me, and Jimmy nodded a greeting, saying he'd handle the drinks since I'd be busy. Jenny asked if I'd play a song with Teddy and his band, saying it would mean a lot to the college guys. With memories of prom and her pleading eyes, I couldn't refuse. I agreed, and Jenny quickly informed Teddy. All eyes were on me as Teddy announced I'd be joining them. The crowd, familiar with me, looked surprised and excited. Teddy humorously introduced me, doubting my guitar skills but suggesting I might sing. The crowd's excitement was palpable, and I felt a strong urge to reconnect with these familiar faces. Climbing onto the stage, I exchanged a friendly jab and hug with Teddy, feeling the warmth of our reunion. Teddy suggested we get started, and I picked up an acoustic guitar. After a quick setup, we decided on Two Angels, starting with a piano lead, followed by my guitar, drums, bass, and Teddy's slide guitar. The song featured a standout piano performance and an extended instrumental. By the end, it felt like we'd never been apart. Teddy's voice was better than I remembered. After the cheers, Teddy introduced me to the crowd, and I asked to stay on stage. We jumped into Bob Dylan's Lily, Rosemary, and the Jack of Hearts, improvising the arrangement with Teddy's guitar licks and the piano shining. The place was packed with people dancing and streaming in. I stayed on stage, joined the band during breaks, and signed autographs. We played country rock classics and a few Leadfoot songs. By the last hour, the crowd was overflowing, and we ended with a harmony-filled version of Poco's Keep On Tryin', which drove the crowd wild even though our voices were shot. After helping with the teardown, accepting free beers, and watching the bartenders clean up, we wrapped up with a final beer in the dim bar room with Ron, Victoria, Jenny, Teddy, and the band. Ron suggested we do this more often so he could retire eventually. Suddenly, I heard Amy's quiet voice behind me. We locked eyes and I was speechless. Jenny broke the moment with a tease, while Ron muttered about California ruining me, making Amy smile before she complimented the performance and left. Teddy and Victoria teased me about still having feelings for Amy, and Ron suggested I was too scared to act. Jenny warned me not to get too close, as Amy had been through enough. Victoria noticed my reaction when my marriage was mentioned and whispered to Ron, who nodded, understanding my issues. Teddy asked about my plans for the next day, and I mentioned writing. Jenny invited me to a cookout at their house, mentioning Amy and her son would be there. I agreed, excited about the idea. Teddy thought it would be good for me to hang out with normal folks. Little did we know, the next day would be anything but typical in Grant City. I slept in until nearly 11 on Saturday, only to be woken by Mom yelling about people on her lawn. It was press and fans. I quickly got ready, knowing I had to look perfect to avoid rumors of a pills binge or scandal. 15 minutes later, I joined Mom on the porch, smiling at her and facing the reporters and cameramen. I directed the reporters to the sidewalk and then onto the porch, setting the rule of ladies first and then left to right. The first question from Entertainment Tonight was about the viral videos of me and Teddy Cooper, and if I was leaving Leadfoot to form a new band. I clarified I had no plans to leave Leadfoot. I was just visiting family and supporting an old friend. Another reporter asked about leaving mid-record negotiations. I said Ethan Rose, our manager, was handling that, and I just needed a break. When asked about rumors involving Tara Boyd and Carl Simpson, I reassured them that Tara and I were fine, and I was simply taking a break. After half an hour of questioning, I stuck to my story. The reporters thanked me, apologized to Mom, and left to edit the footage. I told Mom I was heading to Teddy's cookout, and she and Bob might come by later. I packed my guitars into the Escalade and took a scenic route to avoid the press, arriving at Teddy's place around 12:30. Teddy greeted me and led me to the deck where he was grilling. Nearby, kids were playing in the pool. Teddy mentioned he had dealt with reporters that morning by threatening to call the cops. I laughed, wishing I could have done the same. I grabbed a Diet Pepsi and settled into a lawn chair. Teddy joined me after preparing the pork shoulders. We spent the next 20 minutes chatting, catching up on life, and keeping an eye on the kids in the pool. Teddy updated me on who was married, had kids, and where they worked, and we talked seriously about the past 6 years. Teddy asked why I was back, and I initially avoided the question, focusing on some oak trees. Eventually, I asked if he was happy. He said he was, and I admitted I wasn't sure if I was. It seemed like what I wanted, but it felt overwhelming now. Teddy advised me to just get out, but I explained it wasn't simple due to my band obligations and my wife's unwillingness to move here. When asked about the rumors of Tara and Carl, I confirmed them. Teddy shared that Carl had tried something similar with Jenny years ago, but she had shut him down. I told Teddy I was conflicted about Tara, loving her, but fearing change. He suggested I talk to Tara to understand why it happened, which would help me decide if it was a one-time mistake or something that might recur. He also joked about famous people's tolerance for such issues. Teddy's advice was clearer than Walter's. He shared a story about someone who found their partner with someone else and discovered she was just looking for someone new before ending things. He suggested that if there's genuine love, it might be worth trying to fix things instead of giving up immediately. Jenny's voice cut in as she overheard Teddy's metaphor about fixing a lawnmower. Teddy reassured me that only I could decide if my marriage was salvageable, noting that many couples work through rough patches and end up happy. Afterward, I went to get beers and saw Jenny and Amy preparing food. They froze when I entered. Jenny quickly hugged me, but Amy avoided eye contact and muttered a hello. It seemed like they had overheard my conversation with Teddy, which worried me. Back on the deck, I handed out drinks and joined a debate with Will about Warren Zevon versus Ray Charles. We agreed that while Zevon was versatile, Charles excelled in jazz. As more guests arrived, we moved to the pole barn to play some music. Teddy asked me to perform Time to Start Again, one of our old hits about mending a broken relationship. I sat up on a stool and played the song, noticing Amy swaying to the music and watching me closely. When the song ended, the room was silent. Amy, now bright red, was clearly moved. Will suggested a break and everyone went for drinks, leaving Amy and me alone. Amy apologized for overhearing my talk with Teddy and said she understood what I was going through. I tried to smile but felt awkward. She asked about the song and I told her I hoped it would cheer her up. I then played If I Only Had a Brain from The Wizard of Oz. Amy laughed through her tears and even joined in at the end. I invited her to sit beside me and she did after a bit of hesitation. I asked about her little boy in the pool and her face lit up when she talked about Brighton. We chatted as I played and I noticed she was more at ease. It was time to say what I've been avoiding for years. I stopped playing and folded my arms over the guitar, wanting to say something I'd been holding back for a long time. Amy's face grew serious and she admitted she'd had similar feelings since I'd asked her to homecoming. She explained she was scared and wished she had said yes back then. She'd wondered how things might have been different, especially after her divorce. I was stunned, and Amy urged me to say something. I muttered my surprise and we both laughed at the absurdity of it all. But then Amy became serious again, making it clear she wasn't interested in being the other woman. She insisted that if I decided to leave my wife, she wouldn't be part of that decision or relationship. I agreed, acknowledging that, after all this time, it was good just to talk openly. I wasn't looking to complicate things further, especially with someone I barely knew. Our conversation was cut short by the sound of a helicopter landing nearby, signaling that new complications were on the way. Amy and I stood outside watching the helicopter land a few hundred feet away. Teddy's little girls ran up, excitedly calling the newcomer Uncle Ethan. I was surprised they knew him so well and felt a pang of guilt for not staying closer with Teddy. Ethan emerged from the helicopter, helping out Monty Evans, the Columbia exec handling our contract. I cursed under my breath. I'd hoped to avoid him on this trip. Amy noticed my reaction and asked if I knew Monty. I confirmed with a nod and walked over, joined by Teddy, who looked happy to see Ethan, but puzzled by my irritation. Ethan greeted us cheerfully, asking if they could join the party. Teddy welcomed them and introduced Monty, but I ignored their handshakes and glared. Ethan tried to smooth things over, mentioning the viral video from last night. Monty apologized, explaining that the situation with the video and the rumors about Tara and Carl had become urgent. He asked if we could get the rest of the band out here for a quick meeting. Teddy said they were at the house and I tried to brush it off, but Monty insisted, stressing the seriousness of the situation. Ethan turned to me, clearly frustrated. He explained that Monty's bosses and all of LA had caught wind of the situation, and the news was about to explode everywhere. They were hesitant to continue talks with Leadfoot because Carl's drama made the deal too risky. I realized my career might be in serious trouble if we didn't address this soon. Even though I was considering quitting anyway, I didn't want to narrow my options too drastically. Monty broke into my thoughts, mentioning that the situation had worsened overnight but had shifted when the video started trending online. Teddy and I guided Ethan and Monty to the pole barn, where Teddy went to round up the rest of the band, Will, Rob, and Jimbo. I watched as they entered, each showing a mix of nerves and excitement. Will was tall and brooding, Rob was muscular with a crew cut, and Jimbo had a straightforward, down-to-earth demeanor. Teddy seemed oddly amused, and I had a sense of what was coming. Monty started talking about the attention from last night's performance, hinting at big news. Ethan nudged him to continue, and Monty revealed that Bob Dylan had called, praising our rendition of Lily, Rosemary, and the Jack of Hearts. Teddy seemed unfazed by the news, but I was clearly surprised, especially seeing Will and Jimbo so excited. Regardless of personal tastes, Bob Dylan's praise is a huge deal in the industry. When Dylan speaks, record executives pay attention, especially after his recent reinvention. Monty asked to see what we had, and Teddy agreed, though he was unsure. Monty wanted to see us perform without interruptions, so we played 4 more songs, a mix of upbeat tunes, a ballad, and a medium-tempo piece. Monty recorded everything on a camcorder, which, while not perfect, was better than a shaky YouTube upload. Afterward, Monty thanked us, skipped the food, and promised to call the next day before leaving in the helicopter. Ethan stuck around for the party, and I was surprised to see how well everyone knew him. My guilt for not staying in touch with Teddy grew when Mom revealed she had helped recruit Will, Rob, and Jimbo from Chadwick College. She just asked the music professors for recommendations and put them in touch with Teddy. An hour later, Teddy and I were in the kitchen shredding pork shoulders for sandwiches. He handed me some plastic bear claws and showed me how to use them. As we worked, Teddy mentioned he was seriously considering something but didn't go into details until Ethan came in. Ethan and Teddy exchanged glances, and Ethan joined us, ignoring my questions while grabbing another pair of bear claws. I realized Ethan knew his way around the kitchen, which was another surprise. As we shredded the pork in silence, I waited for Teddy to explain what was really going on. Ethan broke the silence, revealing that Leadfoot had been struggling since the second album. While our popularity had kept us selling millions and packing arenas, our songwriting had declined. He shared that he had flown in to see Teddy about a year after our Grammy win, noticing the drop in quality and hoping Teddy would still be writing. I was surprised to hear Teddy was still writing. Ethan admitted that Teddy's new stuff was only fit for album filler, not hits. Teddy had been trying to convince Ethan to get us back together, but it never happened. When I asked why they hadn't just reached out earlier, Ethan explained that they tried to approach me during a busy period for our last album, Cactus Rose. When I pressed further, Teddy admitted that he had received my latest batch of songs 5 months ago, after the American tour, and had reworked most of them. I was initially pleased, but my smile quickly faded as I waited for more details. Ethan revealed that the songs we'd been negotiating with were mine, and that Teddy hadn't been involved. He'd only seen my rewrites recently, and agreed they were better, but not quite right yet. The issue was that he learned about Carl and Tara shortly before getting the updated songs, which meant he knew about it for 2 months without telling me. I was furious and struggled to keep my hands from hitting the counter. I confronted Ethan and Teddy, demanding to know why they hadn't informed me sooner. Teddy retorted that I hadn't been in touch for 6 years and had ignored his wedding invitation, so he didn't see the point in updating me. Jenny's voice cut through our argument, reminding us we had guests outside who didn't need to hear our drama. We sheepishly returned to shredding the pork, while Jenny put on a cheerful front for the guests. I told Teddy I never saw the invitation, and felt awful about how I'd treated him. He said I needed to figure things out with Tara, and even if he wouldn't forgive her, he thought I should decide for myself. I then asked Ethan if it was just about the money. He assured me it wasn't, that he cared about me like a brother, and didn't want to see me lose everything without a backup plan. Teddy pointed out that Ethan did tell me, but Ethan clarified that he'd ended the negotiations early because he had a tip about Carl and Tara meeting. He didn't think I'd believe him over Tara or Carl, so he didn't mention it. Ethan explained his plan was to help me stay in the band and keep my career on track, even offering to help find a new bass player. Teddy confirmed he was in on the plan. This was a lot to process, and I was pretty pissed. But honestly, I couldn't blame either of them. Ethan had been looking out for me and Leadfoot, even if it was partly for his own interests. I asked what the afternoon was about. Ethan explained that the YouTube videos were blowing up, way bigger than expected. They were getting tens of millions of hits, and even Bob Dylan had taken notice. Columbia was keen to cash in on this, and Monty saw the potential in reuniting us. If Ethan had shown him the rewrites earlier, we might already have the contract and be dealing with kicking Carl out. My anger faded, replaced by a grin. Carl was in serious trouble now. Ethan confirmed he was nearly broke, which surprised Teddy. Ethan mentioned that Carl was spending faster than he could earn and didn't have song royalties like us. Carl had lavish places everywhere: Aspen, New York, Malibu, and even London. I laughed at the thought of Carl chasing London women. We finished shredding the pork and started setting up the trays. I apologized to Teddy, who admitted he might have been too harsh. He'd intentionally sent the wedding invitation to my old address to keep it low-key, which I could only laugh at. We brought the trays outside, and I noticed Amy watching me. Teddy went over, kissed her forehead, and whispered something. She smiled at me, and I wished I'd been the one comforting her. With a beer in hand, I stood alone, thinking about how Tara's infidelity had likely been ongoing. I doubted I'd ever fully get over it, but I decided to hear her out. After 5 years together, I needed to understand the full extent of what happened. Amy's hand on my shoulder broke my thoughts. She asked about my mood, and I shared a saying from my father. Some days you're the pigeon, and some days you're the statue. Her laughter was bright and pure, and it made me feel good to see her so happy. But the next morning, Walter's grumbling woke me up. It was just after 9, and he told me Tara had been on morning shows bad-mouthing me. I thought I was dreaming until he literally threw the blankets off me. I scrambled to get ready as he warned that the press would be arriving soon. In the kitchen, Dr. Bob and Carol were already on edge. Carol asked if I'd heard the news, and when I confirmed it, she wanted to know if it was true. I assured her it wasn't. Bob patted my shoulder, confirming what he'd already told her. The phone rang, and Carol handed it to me. Ethan was on the line, sounding unusually upbeat. He informed me that Tara's team had gone public, portraying her as the wronged party. I was frustrated and confused. Why did she have to handle it this way? It only made a bad situation worse. I asked how he planned to handle things, but he said he'd fill me in once I got to Teddy's place. He advised me to wait until the media showed up and then drive out to Teddy's house so they'd follow me and avoid bothering my mom. Teddy assured me his family was fine with it. Half an hour later, I arrived at Teddy's, closely followed by a line of news vans that stayed off his property. Inside, Teddy showed me the talk show where Tara was being interviewed. The host, with a faux sincere tone, asked Tara about trouble in our marriage. When Tara's smile faltered, the host pushed further, questioning her about rumors of her seeing Carl Simpson from the band. Tara spoke softly as the camera zoomed in on her pained expression. "Carl and I are just friends," she said. "He's helping me through a tough time." The interviewer was eager. "What's going on in your life right now?" Tara's tone turned resolute. "Nick has been having affairs," she revealed. "Carl told me, and though I was skeptical, my agent, who's also a close friend, confirmed it. Nick's infidelities are true." The interviewer pressed, "How many women?" "I'd rather not say," Tara replied. "I confronted Nick last Wednesday and he left. I haven't seen him since." Teddy, who had been watching, turned off the TV, looking frustrated despite his attempt at a smile. Ethan, on the other hand, was smiling. "Looks like things have changed," he said. I realized that the talk with Tara was off. She'd forced my hand, and I decided to play the cards she'd dealt me and get her out of my life. Ethan laid out our choices. We can let her get away with this, or we can bury her. I raised an eyebrow, waiting for him to elaborate. "I've documented everything from the start," Ethan said. "We have photos, videos, and affidavits. After our talk yesterday, I had people digging deeper in LA. We might have more details soon." I was shocked. "There's more?" "Yep," Ethan confirmed. "She's been with several co-stars. Many in the cast and crew know and are willing to share." I felt a chill. This was typical Hollywood, but I never thought my wife was part of it. The facade of America's sweetheart was shattered. "So what now?" Ethan asked. I looked at Teddy, who was nervously clenching his jaw. "Bury the witch!" Jenny shouted from the kitchen. I chuckled. "You agree?" I asked Teddy. He nodded. "Talking won't help. You have all the answers about your marriage. So let's discuss our options," I said to Ethan. "If we do nothing?" "Your career takes a hit," Ethan replied. "New record negotiations for Mustang Ranch could be tough." "Come on," I said. "This happens all the time. It never hurt Mick Jagger, did it?" Ethan laughed. "True, Mick Jagger's image was always the bad boy, but you've been the quiet, thoughtful poet, the good guy. If you don't address this, you risk destroying that image. Columbia will see it as a threat to millions. Your crossover appeal is huge. Rock fans might not care, but the churchgoers in small towns will." I glanced out at the press vans and then back at Ethan. "Okay, how do we handle this?" Ethan grinned and opened his briefcase. 20 minutes later, Teddy had the press set up in the pole barn. I walked in, and the reporters immediately fired questions at me. When they quieted down, I said, "Same rules as yesterday. Ladies first, then the men from my left to right." I pointed to the young reporter who had gone first the day before. "Sorry, you went first yesterday," I said, then addressed the smartly dressed reporter who had gone second. "Mr. Harlan," she began, clearly angry, either about my previous evasions or my infidelities. Ethan had predicted she'd be a strong choice, and her tone suggested she was ready to pounce. "Miss Lockhart," I replied, maintaining a pained expression. "Mr. Harlan, your wife told Valerie Plymouth that you've ruined your marriage with multiple affairs. Is there any truth to these allegations?" I took a deep breath, made eye contact with the reporters, and prepared to respond. "I regret to say Tara was partially right," I began. Flashes from cameras blinded me momentarily, helping me keep a pained expression. "Our marriage is indeed over, but she was wrong about me being unfaithful." I pulled out documents from an envelope and addressed the reporter from Entertainment Tonight. "Your turn, Miss Miller." "So you're saying you've never cheated on your wife?" she asked. "Not once," I replied. "If Tara has any proof otherwise, I'd like to see it. Until Wednesday afternoon, when I found her with one of my oldest friends in our home, I thought my marriage was perfect. Clearly, I was wrong." "Are you saying she was the one cheating?" asked a male reporter with cameras closing in. "Yes, that's exactly what I'm saying," I confirmed. "Do you have proof?" demanded the initial reporter. I turned to the next man. "Do you have any proof to back up your claims?" he asked the reporter. I held up the documents. "This report from A&R Investigations of Malibu will show that Tara was not truthful this morning." In what ways was she untruthful? Asked another reporter. She's been having an intensely physical relationship with Carl Simpson for at least the past 2 months, I said, my voice trembling. I paused, savoring the moment as the scorned husband. This report has dates, times, photos, and more, I continued. And it appears this isn't the first time something like this happened in our marriage. Do you know of any others? Someone shouted. I don't want to go into further details, I said, putting the report back into the envelope. My manager will provide a redacted version soon. I loved my wife deeply and thought she loved me. I've been faithful from the start. It's a dreadful shock to find out Tara didn't feel the same. As questions flew, I raised my hands for silence. Ladies and gentlemen, I said, I need to handle this privately with my family and friends. Please respect that. I left the pole barn, leaving Ethan to manage the press. How'd it go? Teddy asked. I felt exhausted. The fun had worn off, and reality set in. My marriage was over. My wife had repeatedly betrayed me, and the world would now be following this scandal. Jenny hugged me, tears streaming down her face. You really deserved better, Nick, she said. I hugged her back, struggling to hold back my own tears. By noon, the press had left and the band arrived at the driveway. Jimbo asked if there was any news, and Ethan mentioned that Monty would be arriving in about an hour. Teddy said nothing was decided yet and suggested we wait to hear what Monty had to say. When Monty arrived, he offered a recording contract from Columbia. The terms weren't great up front, but included incentives for high sales. It was almost as good as what Leadfoot had been offered, which was surprising given Leadfoot's track record. Monty emphasized that my involvement was crucial. I asked if Leadfoot was done, and Monty confirmed it was due to Tara's public statement. He said even if we dropped Carl, they wouldn't re-sign Leadfoot amidst the current turmoil. Monty also pointed out that adding a new band member and dealing with songwriting would be a risk. Monty told Teddy that Columbia wanted all 5 members of the band, not just Nick and Teddy. They believed in the chemistry among all of us and saw potential in our unique sound, though it was a risk. Monty thought the payoff would come from the combined efforts of the full band. Teddy agreed but said he had a condition. He wanted a 2-year commitment with 2 albums, and if things weren't working out or if it hurt his family, he wanted the option to opt out of the 3rd album. Will, Rob, and Jimbo were all in favor, and I agreed too. Teddy made it clear that his family came first, and Monty seemed concerned about how this might affect the terms. Teddy proposed that if we stayed together, Monty would get an automatic option for a 4th album on the same terms as the 3rd, with no right for Teddy to withdraw. Monty thought it over and agreed to come back after lunch for an answer. When Monty left, Jenny asked about the deal. Teddy said it was a good offer, and she turned to me, asking if I would take care of her. I looked at everyone, Teddy, Ethan, Rob, Will, and Jimbo, waiting to see if I was in or out. Amy stood in the kitchen doorway with her son, her expression unreadable. I needed air, so I stepped outside. 10 minutes later, Amy joined me, saying Teddy was eager to rejoin the band. He'd regretted leaving and had been pushing to get back in with the new songs. I told her it all felt overwhelming, and I needed time to process. She reassured me that Teddy and Jenny cared and would be there for me, and the band could offer a distraction. Then I asked Amy how she'd feel if I went back on the road. She didn't flinch and said it didn't matter. As she took my hand and led me toward the trees, she made it clear that right now there was no us, only me and her. I stayed silent, and Amy continued, explaining that while she liked me, we were different people now and barely knew each other back then. I was clinging to old memories and fantasies. She acknowledged my interest in getting to know her better, but she wasn't going to rush into anything with me while my marriage was falling apart. She also mentioned her son and how she didn't want to deal with more turmoil. I understood her point, but kissed her anyway. Her initial shock faded as she started kissing back, but she pulled away, upset. She scolded me, but I thanked her for giving me something hopeful to look forward to. She softened, hugged me tightly, and said this would be all she'd give me for a while. Back inside, everyone in the living room turned to watch as Amy and I walked in. She sat on the love seat and left space for me next to her. I sat down, glanced at her, and then at the others. I've made some decisions and have a few demands, I started. Rob and Jimbo exchanged high fives again, and Will pumped his fist, clearly excited. I hoped they were ready for what was coming. I told Teddy I wouldn't be running the band. Instead, they would make decisions and then run them by me for approval. I didn't want to be in charge or handle the decision-making anymore. Ethan and Teddy seemed puzzled. I explained that Leadfoot had been burdened with too much responsibility falling on me alone, and I needed to shift that weight. I wanted them to handle the decisions and keep me in the loop, without involving me in every detail. Teddy asked if I wanted the power to veto everything. I clarified that I just wanted to approve major decisions and be informed of the direction we were taking. I didn't care about minor details like dinner plans or hiring choices. I emphasized that we needed consensus on major decisions to avoid division. I wanted to be updated on decisions without being directly involved in the process. Teddy and the guys agreed to the terms. I made it clear I couldn't handle decisions right now, so they'd need to make them and just keep me informed. Songwriting would be separate and everyone would have their shot. Will and Rob were on board, and Teddy gave a hesitant nod, looking at Jenny. Monty came back with basic agreements for our attorneys, and Columbia was fine with Teddy's terms. My conditions stayed between Ethan and the band. In just 5 days, I'd left a major rock band and a high-profile marriage, and was now diving into a new band with a fresh lineup. Meanwhile, I couldn't stop wondering why Tara had betrayed me, and if I'd ever be able to start fresh with someone like Amy. The next day around noon, Teddy and I were finalizing 2 songs we'd been working on late into Sunday night. By Monday at 11, Will, Rob, and Jimbo joined us in the pole barn to work on the first song, When I Get Back. Will surprised us with a fresh arrangement, turning a slow ballad into a rockabilly track with dual lead vocals and a dynamic mix of instruments. It was a new direction, but it fit the new lineup perfectly. Teddy was the first to see her. I was focused on Jimbo and the rhythm guitar when Teddy's lead line ended in a screech. I turned to him only to see his eyes shift to the door. "Hey, Nick," Tara greeted me. She looked terrible. From what Ethan told me last night before he left and what Jenny said this morning, the media was having a heyday with her troubles. It looked like the private investigators' findings had been verified, and now new scandals were coming out almost every hour. "What do you need?" I asked, my tone sharp. "Guys," Teddy said, "how about we head up to the house for a bit?" Rob and Jimbo wasted no time leaving, checking Tara out as they walked by. I thought, if you play your cards right, you might get a chance with her. Once we were alone, I sat on a stool and waited her out. I didn't try to hide my anger or disdain, and she seemed unsure about moving from the entrance of the pole barn. She then whispered something, but I couldn't hear what it was. "What did you say?" I asked. "I was asking if you could call off the dogs now," she said, tears running down her face. This seemed genuine, given her usual lack of tears on command. "Just tell them to stop. You've made your point. I didn't start this fight," I said, my voice getting louder. "And now you, the one who spread the rumor that I was the unfaithful spouse, have the nerve to ask me to do something you didn't even do for me?" "It wasn't my idea. Janice made me do it," she said, confirming my suspicion that her manager was behind this. "She said you'd destroy me unless I took action." "That's nonsense," I roared. "She must have told you that you could turn a bad situation into something good, right?" Tara didn't try to deny it. "You were leaving me," she said. I replied, "You were cheating on me." Her anger cut through her tears. "Oh, get over yourself," she snapped. "You already knew." I was stunned. "How can you possibly think that?" "Didn't you read the tabloids?" she said. "They printed almost every rumor about who I was with." "But you denied all of them," I pointed out. I stopped asking after a while because I thought it was just typical nonsense. She remained silent, wiping her tears and avoiding eye contact. "Seriously, Tara, with Carl? You must have known I was completely unaware," I said. She nodded. "So why would you assume I knew about the others? You knew I'd be mad. That's why you kept it a secret. So you also knew I'd be angry about the other ones, right?" She nodded again, no longer trying to pretend I didn't care. "How many were there?" I asked. "Does it even matter?" she replied, clearly afraid to answer. "You know most of them now, or at least Ethan does." "So they're all true?" She nodded. "So that's not even all of them? That's just most of them?" I asked. Her expression showed she realized she had said too much. "Can't we move past this, Nick? If I stop now, can we get past this?" she pleaded. I laughed, and her hurt expression turned into anger at being dismissed. "Let me ask you something, Tara," I said. "Imagine you find out that every time someone comes to your house, they steal something. Not just once, but dozens of times. If you found out, would you invite them back?" "This isn't about house guests, Nick," she shouted. "This is our marriage." "Exactly. You took something far more valuable than silverware, Tara. You took my self-respect. You destroyed something I thought was perfect. Now I'm not sure if we ever had a real marriage. I question whether you ever truly loved me, or if I was just another way to boost your image." Her tears started flowing again. "You were never just a publicity stunt. she sobbed. I've loved you since we first met. More than anyone else, Nick. You have to believe that. That's not true, I retorted. You've always loved yourself more than you've loved me. Her reaction showed that I had hit a nerve. So, what you said on the phone earlier, she said. That's true, isn't it? Yeah, Tara, I confirmed, understanding what she meant. I've stayed faithful to you from the start, she nodded, wiping away more tears and sniffling. You're right, she admitted. I'm not good enough for you. She laughed. Honestly, I wouldn't stay married to me either. She came over and lightly touched my face. Please, Nick, for old time's sake, can you have Ethan call off the dogs? And the divorce will go through according to the prenups? I asked. No lengthy legal battles? No more attacks in the media? She smiled and nodded. I swear. And what about my things from the house? I asked. They're in my car, she answered, pointing towards the driveway. I thought it over, why not? I figured this would wrap things up quickly and with minimal fuss. No need to return to LA, and I could be done with her with just a few signatures. Most importantly, it seemed like her public image had already been sufficiently damaged, and Carl was now just a distant memory. So, yes, maybe I was being a bit lenient, but ending this quickly and moving on with my life seemed worth it. All right, I said. We file for divorce right away, citing irreconcilable differences. I want to see the proposed settlement papers by next Monday, and then it's all over. Can you manage that? She hugged me. I promise, she said. If you handle this, I'll call off the dogs, I told her. She pulled away from the hug. Do you think you can call them off now? The sooner I get the paperwork, the sooner Ethan will back off, I replied. She wasn't thrilled, but her expression suggested she was getting a better deal than she expected. Thanks, Nick, she said softly. She leaned in and kissed me on the cheek. And Nick? I looked at her one last time as my wife. Yes. Tara, I'm truly sorry, she said, her eyes filling with tears again. I didn't mean to hurt you, and I still love you. I'm sorry too, I replied, deciding to call off the dogs now and deal with any issues later if she didn't keep her promise. She kept her word, though. The next morning, a courier delivered the settlement documents, so that's the whirlwind of those 5 crazy days. Carl went bankrupt about 18 months ago, sold his fancy houses, and now lives in a smaller Malibu place. He's doing studio work and occasionally seen with a starlet. Vince, our drummer, left music behind after making some savvy investments. He's now living in Scotland, painting and golfing. He's shown interest in maybe joining us on an album for some dual percussion like the old Allman Brothers. John Booma, our former lead guitarist, is now our producer. He's doing well, working with Teddy and Will on great new tunes and producing other acts in Nashville and LA. He's glad to be off the road. Tara's career tanked after our divorce, and she was dropped from her show when ratings plummeted. Though her divorce was quick and the press was hushed, her reputation took a hit. She pops up in small roles now, but has lost her America's sweetheart status. Rob ended up with her, and he told me they spent the night talking about me, even during their more intimate moments. I just laughed when he shared that, despite his embarrassment. The Mustang Ranch in Nevada tried to sue us over their name, but we refused to back down. Meanwhile, Will kept bringing his basset hound, General Beauregard, to practice. We thought it'd make a great band name, though we weren't naming ourselves after the Confederate general. 5 months later, General Beauregard's debut album, Another Happy Face, was released to rave reviews. It sold 8 million copies, with 2 #1 rock singles and 3 top 10 country hits. Our follow-up album, Saturday Night Drive-In, released with our first major tour, went diamond, selling 11 million copies in just over a year. The tour sold out before it even started, and the reviews were even better than for the album. Teddy's managing everything well, bringing Jenny and the girls on tour in their own bus. I sometimes join them to work on songs, but with all the noise from the kids, it's hard to get much done. So, the kids? Teddy's daughters, plus Brighton and Walter. Walter, as you saw in People, was said to be born 10 months ago to Nick and Amy Harlan, the local success story. But that was all a publicity stunt by Ethan and the team. The real story is a bit more complicated. It took almost 8 months after that weekend for Amy to agree to a date, and even longer for her to accept my proposal. Amy has since been keeping me on my toes, and I'm hoping she keeps surprising me with new ways to keep things exciting. We live close to Teddy, Jenny, and their kids, maintaining a normal life in Grant City, where people know us well and aren't swayed by our fame. As for Walter, I'll save his story for another time, but he's forgiven me and sends his best.